to order the Board of Custer County Commissioners on Monday, July 31st, 2017. Louis, lead us in the pledge, please. Would you?
You go ahead. You kind of shot.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Didn't mean to shock you, sir.
No, I just
Thank you.
thought you wanted to take your seats. You don't want that.
I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Katnick.
Here.
Commissioner Hood. Present. Commissioner Prince.
Here.
Attorney Clint Smith.
Present.
And Clerk to the Board Kelly Camper, present.
All right. Do we have any additions or amendments to the agenda as published?
I do not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a second. Discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Next agenda accepted. Next item we have on the agenda are the approval of minutes from July 19th.
Make a motion that we approve the minutes of July 19th as given to us in the draft.
Okay.
I'll second the motion as stated.
And I found no additions or corrections either, so all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Minutes are accepted. Audience introductions, please.
Louis Devaney.
Tim Stodola.
Cindy Howard, Jackie Bubis for the Sentinel.
Ken Patterson.
Mike Woolard.
Bob?
Bob Jolly. Dallas Anderson.
John Johnston.
Dan Fisher.
Okay. Thank you very much. The reason we do this, folks, is so we do have your name and your voice, so we try to identify some items later on the agenda we can. Come on in. Public comments. Yes, sir.
I have a few questions, and I'll try to be as brief as possible.
Okay.
Because as I always do when I come to these meetings, I want to get a clarification. So I have a few questions which could be answered yes or no quite easily. I have a question for Mr. Smith and a few things I'd like to address to Mrs. Hood. Okay? All right.
As long as it's fairly timely. Go ahead.
Okay. Are you planning on raising fees? The Sentinel says there's a recent disclosure to raise fees starting with the landfill. I asked Rusty Christensen, have the fees been raised in the landfill? He says no. The question is, do you plan on raising fees?
I'll respond to that if I may, since I'm the one who brought that up. I asked Rusty several meetings ago, I don't remember exactly when, if he would take a look and see how our fees, if they're in line with the landfill fees for the counties around us. And he did that. He reported back that our fees were completely in line with the rest of them. This Board of County Commissioners has not brought up anything about raising fees at the landfill or anywhere else. I can't speak for my cohorts up here, but the question was the fees that we're charging commensurate with the surrounding areas? The answer was yes. As far as I was concerned, it dropped right there.
So the answer is no.
Right.
Thank you.
I would like to further address that. This was a question they raised because down the road we're going to be doing something with the landfill. We have a limited lifetime out there. We're either going to have to spend some money and dig some more pits, go to a collection point, or do something. And when that occurs, it's going to be a fairly sizable investment. And my sense is my colleagues were looking at this only as a source of revenue to start to plan for the future. Now, as often happens, we have people here in the room today who have an issue like this that comes up. Are you going to? Immediately, their take on it is, yes, you are. Oh my God, the world's coming to an end. And that's not the facts. So we have not considered them. I see no reason to raise them at this point in time. I have two primary concerns with that. One of them, if we increase the landfill fees, we're going to increase wildcat dumping. And I do not want to see that happening in our county. Number two, the landfill last year cost us about $18,000 only out of the county funds to maintain. And that's one of the cheapest county services It's almost a cash flow. And as long as we're in that position, if it were costing us $150,000 or $200,000, it would certainly be a different story.
So
Okay?
the answer is no.
The answer is
Thank you.
no.
Next question. Did you plan, or are you planning to ram down the throats of the citizens of this county a dark skies ordinance with penalties, fines, bomb your house, or whatever?
I'll start, maybe I'll probably want to
And the
respond to
question
that.
is, are you planning on passing an ordinance?
The answer right now is no. And the background on that was what was proposed was a proposed ordinance from a citizens group. And from there, it's just snowballed to where we're going to do it. And
Into hysteria.
as I am, until it becomes a board of items for discussion of Board of Commissioners, my position is that no decision's been made and I don't consider it.
Yes,
May I
ma'am.
address that? I'm going to defer to Clint. It's light pollution. I know that people like to refer to it as dark skies, but it is. Dark Skies is an organization, okay? And we already currently have an ordinance in place, and the question was brought to us, could that be modified? And we are still in process. So I don't believe that this board is in a position to say yay or nay until we have due process. And I'll defer to Clint in case he wants to add something.
Well, let's get the terms right. It's not an ordinance. It's never been proposed as an ordinance. We have a zoning resolution, the Custer County zoning resolution, that has language regulating light pollution in the county. The proposal is to modify or amend the zoning resolution regarding regulation of light pollution. That's where it's at. There was a presentation by the organization I'm involved in, Dark Skies, back in April, and then in June there was that first presentation was called a workshop. In June there was a public meeting where there was input from the public. The next step in the process was to refer it to the Planning Commission. That's where it is now. It's been referred to the Planning Commission. There was a draft of a proposal, and that's all it was just a rough draft. It was something to give everybody a starting point as to what we might be looking at in terms if the zoning resolution is going to be modified at all. But now it was still in the very early stages. It's gone to the Planning Commission. They will do their studies and investigations and hold their public meetings, and eventually, probably a few months down the road, make a recommendation. But even if there is any action taken, number one, it's not going to be an ordinance. It's going to be amending the zoning resolution. That's different.
Which doesn't have penalties of law.
No, there are penalties on it, but I can tell you that the zoning resolution, the way that has operated, as even though there are potential penalties in there, that's because you have to have some kind of a hammer at some point in time. I mean, you can't just say, well, okay, everybody's just going to do this voluntarily. But the historical fact is there has never been a prosecution, at least during Jackie Hobby's time, and I think she's been planning and zoning director for 7 or 8 years. If there are violations, she talks to people, she works things out with them. We have never had to go to court on anything. We've never fined anybody. Nobody has ever gone to jail for a violation of the zoning resolution. But the language is there. It is there in case you run into a problem.
But at the same time, though, this has been no action by the board. We have not addressed any of these issues per se. This was in the proposal that was sent forward. So are there penalties? No, because we have not addressed those.
Well, the 2 points.
Is that
Number one,
fair?
the people of
Say
this county do not want the government telling them what kind of light bulbs they can use. That's number one. Number two, I'm given to understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there is no light pollution in this county. Am I correct in that, Mr. Smith?
You know, I could debate this with you for quite some time, but just wait a second. This is in the early stages, and I just don't want to have to deal with this issue every time we have a meeting right now. It's with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is going to have hearings on it. Go to those hearings. Dark Skies, the people from Dark Skies are certainly going to be there, and they're going to advocate for what they want. All these questions can be addressed then. I mean, I could talk to you about this. I can talk to you about it privately if you want, but
That's
it's...
fine. I'm just want to know if the Sentinels claim that you're going to ram this down our throats. Is the answer no?
The answer is no.
Thank you. Okay.
Would the Sentinel have any, you're the reporter, would you have any response to that?
I don't remember the Sentinel saying that you guys were trying to ram anything down their throat, but I don't write the entire Sentinel. So I can't.
Okay, I'm just asking you,
I can't really answer that.
All right,
I'd love to see where we said that.
thank you.
I can quote you.
No,
Okay, well,
listen,
let's
if
talk
we're gonna,
another time.
let's not,
We can talk another
we can
time.
get into this if we need to as an agenda item, folks. I wanna, this is
Mr. Katnick, the commission.
An injunction. no, please go on, I don't mean to
Commissioners are
interrupt
being
you.
attacked. And reasons are given for your recall. I'm going through them to determine what's true, what's
No,
not.
please, I appreciate
Okay,
it, please continue that.
This is why I'm here.
No, what I'm saying, I don't wanna get into an argument between the two as to what's,
I'm not arguing, I'm just was gonna quote, but I don't have to.
please go ahead. You got the, please go ahead. If you wanna quote, feel free to.
No, I don't want to.
Okay.
I can or I can't. What would you like?
If you'd like to, go ahead. I'm giving you permission. But the importance of this, folks, is not to get into long discussions. We need to get into
Well,
issues.
I don't either.
Just a
That's why I
second.
wanted yes or no answers, and I don't have to do this, and I'm
Well,
fine. I don't
just
want
a
to take a lot of your
second,
time.
just a second. No, we'll go forward with this. If we need to, our policy has been if we need to go into an agenda item, we can certainly do that also. Please,
Okay,
go ahead.
okay. The commissioners are trying to ram down our throats a dark skies ordinance for Custer County, and it goes on.
Okay.
And who was the author?
George Grimlich.
Okay. Thank you. Next item, please.
Okay, thank you. I think this is a question for Mr. Smith. Has the commission illegally had, what do you call it, closed sessions? What do you call it, executive sessions, closed sessions, what do you call them?
Executive session.
Has the commission been holding executive sessions illegally? Have your executive sessions been illegal? Mr. Smith?
No.
Thank you. Next thing. Mrs. Hood, I don't know you, so I'm just going to give you information here.
Okay.
I'm hearing all sorts of bad stuff about you,
Of course you were.
okay? And don't construe from what I'm about to say that I agree with it or believe it. I'm just
Okay.
delivering it. And then I have a couple things to say to you. I hear you're arrogant, demanding, you're a bully, you're full of yourself. Several friends of mine come and say they've observed your behavior in restaurants and whatever, and that you're very eccentric. None of that bothers me. I don't care. What I care about is that I hope that doesn't become the impetus for misusing any power, and I am not accusing you of doing this. I don't care if you're eccentric. So was Socrates. Okay? But what I do want to say to you is that you have a business out there called Painted View, I believe.
A painted view range.
You have a number, and I don't know how many, each year of events out there. Those events bring a decent amount of money into this county. In other words, what I'm saying is, you just have the,
Cutting loss.
thank you. The restaurants are full, the motels are full. Your organization brings in, as from my perspective, a lot of outside money which finds its way into the pockets of local businesses. I'm correct in that, right?
Right?
Okay.
May I add something to
You
that?
may.
I would like to say that for 10 years now, since we started doing major events like that, I think the ranch has created an economic stimulus package for the entire county, not just the two towns. We fill beds with heads. The restaurants are full. We also employ and bring on, we had 18 people helping with that event. So we brought on more people. We used the bakery. We used the flower shop to help with the event. We had potable water, oak disposal. I could go on.
Caterers.
But actually, we had 3 fundraising events, 2 from the Cattle Women's Organization and 1 from our local Rotary Club. In the evenings, they had dinner, and they were fundraisers for those organizations. So as the community person that I am, I believe in collaborating and partnering with everybody to be successful.
So my assertion that you're bringing money into the community, which is good for the economy, is correct, right?
Yes, sir?
Okay, I have one more thing to say to you. When I was researching this with Mrs. Hobby, Mrs. Donna Hobby, who's very patient and very kind, Mr. Prince's rebate back to the community of his health insurance and his pension plan, I left her office and then it came to me. I seem to recall that Mrs. Hood also said that she would not take the raise. So I go back to Miss Hobby. And I said, Donna Hood said she wasn't going to. She says, yes, but it's a different thing. And she totally confused me. And by the time I got it unraveled, here's what I found out. Your compensation package, and forgive me, I didn't write the whole figures down. I'm speaking roughly, is $85,000. $12,000 and something is health insurance. 20-something hundred is pension or the retirement plan. And 60-some thousand is your salary, which includes the raise. But I did not know, not only have you refused the pension plan and the $12,000 health insurance, you are giving back to this county every penny of your $60-some thousand salary in a special account, which when Mrs. Hobby, I believe, brings you bills or whatever, you write checks out of your account to pay for. You just recently paid $40-some $100 for computers, if I'm not mistaken, or if she's not mistaken. Is that correct?
Let me tell you what I've donated back to the county from my salary after taxes. Before I became county commissioner, I met with Mr. Niquette and Donna to make sure that what I wanted to do was okay on our books. And that is donating back
To the county.
in the general fund. They have created a line item for income donations, which is me. And anybody can see this on record, okay? Anybody can see what I do. My first checks took care of the computers that you see.
So my point is,
Well, let me just tell you what
you're
all
not
I've
finished?
done.
Forgive me.
No, I'm not done.
I'm sorry.
My next checks went to the window treatments of the community center because the commissioners before me never planned on protecting our valued asset in any way, shape, or form as far as heat and cold that we have to deal with all year round. So I donated over $6,000 for 29 window treatments. My next check went to the capital campaign and assets for our fair board. I donated $5,000 for capital assets to the fair board. My next checks that I'm accumulating are going to go towards the hardware that will happen for our SIPA grant that we got, which is to have video streaming right here so that all of our citizens can be active and that the reports that are given here by the papers are not skewed in any way, which they have been. So you will be able to interact with the Board of County Commissioners, and it's going to be about $7 to $10 grand for the hardware that will take. And that's where my next checks will go.
So my point in saying that you're donating all of your compensation back to the citizens of this county is correct.
Correct.
Thank you. That's all.
Is that it?
Oh, there's one more thing. Thank you for doing that.
You're
By the
welcome.
time you and Jay Prince finish your terms, you will have donated back to the citizens of this county just a couple of $1,000, under $400,000. 300, I've added it up, and I'm sorry to bring $398,000 that you would have given back to the citizens of this county.
Correct.
Thank you.
I would like to make one other statement. Since I was elected and sworn in, I've never taken any of the county insurance monies.
I didn't know that.
No. I haven't since day one. Okay.
That's $12,000 a year, isn't it?
Perfect.
Thank you. So, let me retotal my figures. It's going to be well over $400,000 that the three of you are giving back to this county, compensation to which you are legally entitled. Correct?
Correct.
Hope that's in the minutes.
Correct.
Thank you. I'm done.
Next.
If it's okay, I'll piggyback on you on the flooding report.
Pardon me?
If it's okay with you, instead of a public comment, I'll just piggyback if there's anything to add on the Wetmore
Okay,
events this
yes.
weekend.
Okay, now we'll move on to commissioner items. And we'll start with Mr. Prince.
I really don't have any, Mr. Chairman. I was in Texas last week on some family issues, and since the last meeting we had, I didn't do squat. Except talk to our airport advisory board multiple times, and they'll make a very positive report in a few minutes. Good job, guys. That's all I can say.
I actually attended on 7/25 the Fair Board of Directors debriefing on our county fair, which I am proud to report was a great success. The sales numbers on the animals that were sold were higher than last year. So I want to thank all the participants and family and friends and all the organizations that went into that to make it the great success that it was. On 7/27, last Thursday, I actually went up to Fair Play. There was an Upper Ark workforce meeting represented by regions, and Fair Play actually showcased their community. So it was interesting to learn about Fair Play and that whole county up there. And came to being that the three commissioners that were up there, no one on their board was representing Upper Ark. So they elected to have representation on that. So it was a great meeting. One thing that I would like to bring up is that we have appointed boards. The airport board is here. We also have an appointed board in our weeds committee. And we're not getting representation from that board on monthly meetings as we are the airport board. Since I sit on the board of tourism, and that's also appointed, but a commissioner sits on that, I will bring you up to date on those reports. But I would like to see us have a report from our weed committee on a monthly basis.
I agree.
Okay. Anything else?
Nothing else.
Let me bring you up to date a little bit on the weed committee. There's been some information out there that where we don't have a weed committee, that we're not doing anything, that we've totally fallen apart, and that's not true. We are meeting our state obligations, and as an example, folks, I talked to, I forget the lady's name now, from the Department of Agriculture that works those programs, and I asked her for money, and she said, well, you didn't apply for any money from the state for weed programs this last year. Those have to be in October. So we will be having applications in. We do have a contract with a lady or a gentleman that did the spraying last year. They'll be doing some more spraying. We're not going to be spending a lot of time spraying on public lands this year because money's tight. But I really feel the first place we have to do this, the most critical place we control weeds are on our bar ditches. Because when we have trucks go up down the road that have had other hay on them, occasionally we'll have weed seed blown off of there. And the first place you see this is in the bar ditch. And I've got an excellent example at my place. It's called spreading dog bane. We don't see much of it in this county. There's an awful lot of it in Gunnison County. And it's a poisonous plant to horses. And if you go by in the fields in the fall and you see something that looks like, gosh, these leaves turned real early, well, that's spreading dog bane. The spreading dog bane isn't even on the list of weeds to be controlled. And those are the issues I think we have to bring forward, because those of us that are in the hay business in the valley certainly cannot afford to have poisonous plants spread from the bar ditches into our hay fields. It's a big issue. Oh gosh, well, I've been kind of busy. One thing I'd like to read first to you, and this letter is dated the 10th of July, addressed to me as chairman. This will confirm our conversation of July 7, when I informed you of my intention to give up my job for the county. I will be available to work as needed to train my replacement until November the 15th, which will be my last day unless final arrangements to your satisfaction can be made earlier. It's been a pleasure to work for the county for the past 28 years. It is time to step aside. John V. Paquette. John has been our finance officer for 28 years. As all of us, you reach a point, as John and I were reminiscing, where you kind of run out of steam. And John's position isn't that, oh my God, I'm managed, I'm quitting. His position is that I'm tired, I need to do something, want to slow down and have some other things taken care of. So we will be searching for a new finance officer.
We're addressing that. Thank you.
The other thing that I've been involved with, and it's, I don't look at Facebook very much, kind of fun. I saw last night some postings in there on the Wetmore flood, as to where were the commissioners, who was the commissioner, we know which one, the whole commissioners were here, and so forth. I have made, I believe, 6 trips to Wetmore, starting back last spring when we started with runoff. We have very closely monitored the runoff from the burn scars. We've had a very, very strong program that Cindy has headed up, and some other folks have participated in warning folks of the dangers of floods, of how to sandbag, making sandbags available, asking them to clean up the debris along their stream on their property. Some have done it, some haven't elected not to. We've had some volunteers, we've had some assisted people, the Lower Arkansas Water Conservancy District, and you can add to this, Cindy, but they provided some funding to clean out some of the streams. Just in the last week, folks, I was down there on, I believe it was Wednesday night. We had some runoff waters that were fairly high. And I arrived and I was down there until, I don't know, pretty close to dark, after the waters had receded. I went to Gunnison Saturday. My grandson received his Eagle Scout honors. And we returned, and as soon as I returned on the radio, I heard what was going on, so I went back to Wetmore Saturday night. I looked at all the pressure points. I watched our crews that were cleaning up debris out of the ditches. I visited with some of the local residents that I saw that were out, as I do every time I go down there. We had one point in Greenwood, the first bridge on the south end, is about I'm guessing it maybe a 6-foot culvert, 6 or 8 foot culvert. It's a big tube anyway. And we had a trailer house that was parked right above it. Working with the landowner, he removed that old trailer house, so we got that debris out of the creek. When this come down, we had a tremendous amount of debris washed down. And this is debris primarily that come out of the fallen trees and down trees and stuff that were there outside the fire area. In looking at it, I see very few of those trees, and you saw it too, Cindy. I didn't see very many of those, if any, that were black. If they were from the fire area, they would have been black. We did have water come up over the road, and I have accolades for 2 or 3 different groups. First of all is the Road and Bridge. As you know, Larry Haynes is the assistant road boss in that area. Larry and Kevin Day were on it immediately, and had contacted Roger Squire up here. Roger mobilized, I believe, 4 people from here in addition to himself. We took down a truck, we took down backhoes. We had some of our crew were manning the roadblocks. Larry sat on the middle of this culvert during the flood with the backhoe, reaching out and cleaning out debris so we keep water going through that tube, putting it in a truck, hauling it down to the county road shop and dumping it. And this continued until about midnight. We had, I think it was 4 up here that went down, but our road crew, I think, really stepped up to the plate. The second group down there that we've been working with in liaison is the fire department. It's not, it's kind of one of these things when a small community, you wear several hats. But the fire chief is an example. I have visited with, in fact, I visited with him Saturday night and again yesterday. They were doing the best to help monitor the flows. We have some citizens down there that are monitoring the flows. Bill Donnelly is one of them. He's the first resident that's up the creek that gets threatened. Bill Donnelly actually had some equipment in attempting to shore up the bank by his house. And so when we had the flood come through, being a longtime resident there, well, he alerted the people downstream. We're going to have an after-action review to see what happened on what timelines and how we can do it better. But to summarize, we were extremely lucky. The water topped the bridge on 386, which is at the
387, yeah.
at the intersection, which is South Hardscrabble. It went over the top of that bridge. I'll get to you, just don't let me forget you a sec. The water went on down, spread out onto the road in Greenwood a little bit at the south end where the creek is very, very shallow. Then was back in the channel. When it hit this bridge, it backed up and was going around both ends of the bridge as well as through it. And this is because our people got on it and we were digging debris out and was maintained without any damage to it. We had additional flooding occur down at the 390 road, which goes across Hardscrabble at the south end of, the north end of Greenwood. We had debris again come up next to the culvert. It did flood across the road. It did go down through a shop and come close to a house. But as we got the debris cleaned out of there again, minimized the damage. The fellow that lives at the first bridge in Greenwood on the south end had water come down before it hit the bridge. It went up to his basement windows. Yesterday I was looking at it, visiting with him. There was water marks of probably 3 feet up on the basement windows when the water come down. And that wasn't the result of water damming up at the road. That was just how high the water was when it come down the channel. We come on down from there. We had some spreading out, through the floodplain until we got down to the Wetmore Road. The bridge at Wetmore did not sustain any damage that I could ascertain, and I also, as best I could, tried to determine if there was any damage on the bridge clerk on South Hardscrabble. And Cindy was there yesterday, and we couldn't see where we had any washouts. We had any question to the integrity of the structure, but the washed out irrigation ditch right there at that bridge on the south end of Wetmore. Water did come up and come down the road on the irrigation ditch and come out into the road, washed down the roadways, and then returned back to the creek. It went along some yards because they're right there beside the road. But again, and I have not had any other reports come in, but I did not see, and I'm not aware of any other additional damage, with the exception that the footbridge we have down at the community building broke loose, but all it did, and one end broke loose and it swung back next to the bank. I didn't go to see how badly it was damaged, but again, that's in the big scope of things, a somewhat minor item. This flood maximized pretty well the stream capacity and was the result of 8/10 of an inch of rain. Now, we've had people laugh at what we've tried to do in Wetmore, and we put up some signs that said, caution, this area may be prone to post-fire flooding. We had those signs defaced. We had people that called and complained about them, but now I hope they can see where the water did go down the road. We're warning people on the road that it was at risk for being flooded. I went also down to Penrose yesterday, down to where the Arkansas and Hardscrabble Creek meet. There was some water reached that far down, but it was not a big flow. It was, I don't think, and looking at it, a whole lot more than what we see when Grape Creek is high out here. And when I was there, the water had cleared back up. Gosh, this is like I'm forgetting something on the reports. But on the Facebook things where they said, yeah, there were no commissioners around, there was, nobody knew what was going on. Well, I don't go down there with a red light flashing on top of my car and say, hey, I'm here, everybody listen. I don't think that's the purpose of it. The purpose is to be there and to understand what's happening. Now I want to, I think I've covered most of what I had in mind. Cindy, would you? And Cindy was, again, we're right on top of this with our emergency operations office. And I want you to cover what I didn't cover or forgot and give me your impressions.
Saturday night, I was coming home from Salida, took a side trip to the Cottonwood drainage up in Fremont County and was looking at the flooding there. Was a few miles out of town when I got the flash flood warning. Came straight to dispatch, and Joe McCarthy, I knocked on the back door, went in. We don't think about what our dispatchers do, and I just want to say he did an amazing job. He has multiple things going on in addition to some 911 calls and the flooding and trying to get the code red messaging out. We also had a frantic wife and 3 overdue climbers on Crestone Needle and a SAR mission spinning up. Later there were some other calls locally. One deputy was left in town. So, you know, there are a lot of background things. There was a phone call after I talked to Tom Magnuson to National Weather Service. I think that's where the misinformation on Highway 96 bridge came. The report was that the water was topping 3 to 4 feet over County Road 390, and it got out there that it was the bridge at 96. That was misinformation. We had multiple media calls. We had the Wall Street Journal, the Denver Post, and a lot of the TV stations calling. So we got that information corrected as quickly as possible. There were complaints that the Code Red went out too late, and we've been working on educating folks that that Code Red messaging group is pre-built and it includes Bill Donnelly and all the way down beyond Wetmore. So when that message goes out, some of the pre-built messaging maybe needs to be adjusted in the after-action review. But we of course knew that Greenwood was flooding. We were trying to warn anyone in Wetmore who didn't know that the flooding was imminent, and that was through dispatch. So public education, I think we'll look at doing a public meeting in Wetmore. I spent the day yesterday with one of the gentlemen from National Weather Service, and we went from the bottom to the top and met Bob at 386, 387. South Hardscrabble's probably got some heavy damage, and we'll be following up with Forest Service there. We anticipated that, that's why it's closed off. All in all, I think the efforts by everyone went really well. There's always room for improvement, but I think it's time to bring that Wetmore community back together and do maybe a weather spotter training and work that timeline. So when Bill sees that water at his place, that he makes that call to National Weather Service, and we get that one-to-one accurate, timely information going. So we'll try to, Ole was great on getting information. It was just, getting, from my position, the situational awareness and getting that word out is critical.
I came up there about 5:30 last night, and I thought one good thing that's happening is the light that you have with that notice, and I believe you had it at the other end coming down too. So I don't know who put that information, possible flooding on the road.
I believe that's CDOT.
Okay.
My other comments, we'll be following up on this. But, since the wildfire and since we started the tri-county recovery meetings, Commissioner Katnick has gone after Senator Gardner relentlessly, getting attention drawn to some of the needs. Commissioner Prince helped us with a request to the state that pretty much got shot down. But especially when you get some misinformation out there on Twitter, you get the state's attention really quick. And our next follow-up meeting is Thursday in Wetmore. The recovery meeting is at 1:30. For those players, we'll have Army Corps of Engineers, USGS, NRCS, Forest Service, BLM, all those folks back together. So I'm not done asking folks for money and what the next step is. And we'll be meeting in the community center, so thanks for your efforts there. But I think, as Bob said, there were a lot of people that said it's never going to happen. And we got lucky spending the day with National Weather Service, the latency and some of that. A flash flood is different. We can't warn you the same way as we can in other events. So all in all, I thought it was a pretty good response. There's always problems, and communication is always the number one problem. So I just wanted to be here to, if you had any questions of me, I'm available to follow up, call it. But I'll be working on that timeline and meeting with Shannon here later.
Another thing the Weather Service does, I almost have them on speed dial, but every time I call for information, they're very, very helpful. on giving me what their forecasts are, what the radar rainfall indications are, what their Doppler, they've got another way of estimating indirectly rainfall, what those estimates are. And whenever we see a cloud over that area, I keep pretty close tabs on my phone with the radar maps. They've been extremely helpful in giving us their best estimate. I mean, a forecast is a forecast. And the rain intensity is one thing, and the rain direction is another thing. And those storms were so slow moving on Saturday, the direction got us. But what I want you folks to take home as a message, according to the best estimates we can have from the Weather Service, because we've had no support from the other federal agencies on getting monitoring equipment up on the hill, in spite of many promises, was that we had about 8/10 of an inch of rain, less than an inch. So to see how much water come down with that 8/10 of a rain, think what would happen if we had a 2-inch rain in that watershed. But if we have a 2-inch rain in a watershed, we're going to know about it. And the last thing I have, two more things. One thing, I got in an argument with the televisions on Saturday night. Channel 11, I think they said they had something on the air about the flooding. I'd met them sitting at the roadblock going into Greenwood and explained to them they couldn't go down there, that it wasn't safe to stay out of there. I said, I'll take you down here where you can set up and get some shots of the water at the community center where it's safe to get in and get out. Well, they went down the road and turned around behind me and went back up the road the back way. And when I realized what they'd done, I called Roger and we agreed that they were not going to be setting up in an area that they put anybody at risk. I drove up the road and here they were set up. So I explained to them why I didn't appreciate them being there. And my primary reason isn't to inhibit their ability to cover the news, but I do not want our people distracted. I don't want an operator there that's cleaning mud out of a flood and be distracted by a television camera or television lights and have him forget and hit the wrong lever and fall in. I mean, it's a safety concern that I have. It's not anti-media, but it's safety. We had the same issues with the Junkins fire. And then also I ran into Channel 5 News, and they were set up along the highway. And again, I was able to tell them, no, 96 bridge wasn't washed out, that no, the roads weren't closed. I mean, the Highway 165 and some of these things that they were had. I said, no, this is and I gave a situation report. One other thing that transpired, I'm being off windy, I apologize. One other thing that transpired though, I called Cindy from the house to get an update, and she was getting ready to get with the Weather Service, and I said, I would like to have a situation report from you as soon as possible. And then as time went on, I needed to get on the road. Well, we have an intern, her name is Meredith. And
Meet her tomorrow.
She called my house and gave my wife the information update. And in a way, I would like to bring her into some of our committees and let everybody else understand what a report should contain. It was very precise. It listed every road. It listed every bridge. I had an update on everything that was happening. And the whole thing took about 3 or 4 minutes. And I commend you and her. That's the type of people we have. But in closing, the last thing we do have is that we don't need to be there as commissioners on site. We've got good people, excellent people, who have responsibilities they take very seriously. And my trip to Wetmore was more just to observe and to thank the crews that were out there. It certainly wasn't to come in and take any type of direction or command of any situations. We have, and I say this most respectfully, we have a very good emergency response. These officers call emergency response. We have a very good road crew that has experience in these situations, and I commend them all for their reaction on Saturday. The last thing I have as an announcement, on August the 28th, we will be hosting a Colorado Department of Transportation regional planning meeting here in Westcliff. We have one about every 2 months. It's basically just to bring us up to date on what projects that we have in the area. Our region goes all the way from, well, Leadville or Fairplay and south, all the way along the range, and almost, I think it goes all the way to the border on the eastern side. But we will have a couple of projects coming up. You saw we just had some paving done on 96. That wasn't construction, that was maintenance. They're two different channels. But they will be putting an overlay on Highway 69 from about the airport south to the county line. And then they're also talking about an overlay from the county line south, probably towards Walsenburg. This comes apart as they're thinking they want to do it. It'll probably be 20 or 30 miles of overlay that's to occur in 2018. But again, we'll have more on that information, and we are hosting it as a county. And that's all I have. Now, yes, John, thank you for your patience.
No problem. I've talked to approximately a dozen people down in the Wetmore area. They wanted to compliment you on your attendance, participation, and help Saturday night.
Well, thank you. It was just something I think we need to do. We serve the citizens, and I think it's important that, and my colleagues do the same thing. This just comes with the job, and my predecessors would have done the same thing. But thank you. Okay, anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Didn't mean to get so long-winded, folks. But I thought this was maybe a good time to give you all a briefing.
Do you have a time on that August 28th?
10 o'clock. We'll be down at the finishing arrangement. We're planning on the bowling alley. Yeah. Okay. Attorney items. I'm sorry I was so long-winded, Counselor. You'd think I was some kind of a defense attorney giving a summation.
The only thing I wanted to talk about was you all got this memo from Eric Bergman, the policy director for CCI, Colorado Counties, Inc., about some changes that have occurred, statutory changes to the Colorado Open Records Act. I'm taking a look at it, and I will review our current Cora policy, and I may need to make a few changes to bring this into, or bring our policy into accordance with these statutory changes. And I'll have something for you in just a few days on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks for all the work you do. This band gets a lot of stuff that's behind the scenes that we most of us never realize until it has to have action. All right. Do we have any need for an executive session today?
No, sir.
No.
Okay, one item that I would like to remind everybody of, that when we have executive session, we record that part of it that is, which part, the personnel part or the advice?
The only part that is not recorded is when the county attorney is giving legal advice. That's subject to attorney-client privilege. And for the record, I'll state that when we have done that, it has been solely for the purpose of legal advice. I've given you various options. No decisions have ever been made in executive session on any of these legal issues, since that's something that's been stated a number of times. It just doesn't happen that way. But everything else we do in executive session is recorded.
This doesn't necessarily appear in the minutes, but I think Kelly will attest to this. So when we come out, I make a statement that we were on topic, and then the attorney makes a statement that we were on topic, and that is recorded. Okay. One other thing for you before I forget. Back to clarifying, this is an old one we're beaten and beaten, but there's been questions raised about us going together to Denver. And we visited with you, and you checked the statutes, and we posted out here the 24-hour period that we were going together, and we followed all the regulations. Is that a fair statement?
That's correct. I obviously wasn't with you, but my instructions were do not discuss county business when you're together. When you're traveling together, that's customary for county commissioners, especially from the rural areas, going to meetings in Denver. They very often travel together, and your representation has been that you do not discuss county business on those trips.
Old business. Excuse me. Go. Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say I've got some old business I'd like to address. That being on July 19th, we had the report from Planning and Zoning regarding their letter that was read to us and the recommendation that the zoning resolution not be considered for building codes. And in the minutes as stated, we said that we would consider it in a future meeting. I don't know if you want to discuss that today, but I would like to see that discussed, because I'd like to understand from Kelly what the process would be, since it's now in our lap. They gave their recommendation, we heard it, and we said we would take it under advisement. So I would like to know what our next step would be, whatever we need to do.
Okay.
Well, I think that's probably more of a Clint question. I think your next step is just whatever just discussion amongst you guys, right?
Can I narrow the question maybe, if I may, please? If the three of us, and this is hypothetical now because we have not discussed this, but hypothetically, if we said we'd still like it to go to the voters, the question I would be asking is, when do you need to have that information so that it goes on to the regular election, so there's not a special election? Because I don't want to spend county funds on an election.
So you would need to come up with a resolution saying that you're going to have this question, and then I would need the wording for the question by September 8th.
By September 8th.
And that is, help me out if I misstate here, but basically the commissioners decide what does or does not go on the ballot in terms of some of these questions. Is that a fair statement?
Some of the questions, yes.
That's what we've done in the past. We had an example, I think it was the economic development one for broadband. And the commissioners a couple years ago said, no, that we don't think that's appropriate, we're not going to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So the final say, other than things that are brought forward by petition from the citizen groups, this comes to the Board of Commissioners for their approval or disapproval.
Right.
Okay.
And I just want to add my comment that I'm not really satisfied in that there's only been one public hearing. I thought that there would have been more of a process from our planning and zoning. So that's where I am, because I had citizens come up to me after that meeting and since then. And I know that when Jackie read her report to us, she listed so many people that were in that room. And I'm going to say to you that just about that amount of people have come to me. I don't know what you two are experiencing, but it's our job to listen to our constituents. And I personally don't feel that one meeting cut it. And I guess I really don't like the fact that there was in that letter it was stated that the vote was 5-2. 2 not on board with the other 5. I know it's been stated that this has been brought up to the commissioners. I think Dallas stated 37 years, maybe?
4 times.
4 times, okay. But that tells me something, Dallas. That tells me that we've got citizens out there that are trying to send us a message too. They're sending us a message. And whatever that is, 37 years, you've had people come and go in this valley. And all I'm saying is that one hearing by planning and zoning didn't cut it for me.
I was expecting another one within a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and it didn't happen, did it?
Not yet.
No. Okay. I don't know.
I want to question one thing you said, Donna. Maybe I misunderstood. You said you didn't like it, that the vote was 5-2.
Mm-hmm.
That's a majority.
I don't understand.
Well, it was a majority saying that they did not want to recommend building codes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess I don't know if it's proper to ask the 2 that didn't why they didn't vote towards it. I'd like to understand.
Well,
the reason.
if we want to take this on, I'm going to speak as chairman. We have the ability to, they'll come to us if they want to in person, and we have the ability to host some meetings on it, to go into it farther if we want to, or we refer it back. And when they come forward, usually they will have recommendations on why they think it was a good idea, and they'll, normally then, if we want to ask, well, why, what were the dissenting viewpoints, and those can be presented to us. And we
Yeah,
can
I think
certainly
it's,
do that, but this,
I think it's important enough. Like I said, I don't know who have come to you two about it, but I certainly have gotten the phone calls and the visits.
I have a lot of people on both sides of the fence. I'm a little bit lighter because I've had certain portions chewed on. I say that facetiously, but there is concern out there, and it is a controversial issue. And I don't think we've reached the end of it. I don't think we've reached a decision on it. And I think it's something that we have to look at and try to do what the citizens want. And if we think we need to have additional explorations, we certainly can. I think maybe if we ask the planning and zoning to explore it further, I can't speak for them, but I think they would be willing to also to explore it further.
Well, I think that a good next step would be to have it on the ballot.
Well, these are all things we've got until September the 8th.
Well,
Which is right around the corner.
it's right around the corner, and if she's saying that a resolution would have to be made by us, so that resolution has to happen before September 8th. So you're looking at the month of August for something to happen, honestly, right? For you. So, yes, sir.
I was at that first meeting, and I also commented. But I felt that meeting was more on emotion than it was on actual fact, and I think a secondary or tertiary meeting with the public and the zoning committee to hear further before you put it on the ballot. Because if you have another meeting or two that can be projected by other people that weren't able to make that first meeting, you may be able to say, okay, it's not going to a vote, or we should put it to a vote. But I think just putting it to a vote at this time doesn't do the public any justice. I think one meeting was not enough. I think that first meeting was more of a dissent and emotion-packed meeting than it was a fact-filled discussion.
I agree with you. That's why I was surprised that we received the letter that quickly right after that meeting. That's where I am.
This is your area, sir. You have any comments?
I think we need to put it on a future board agenda item. I think we ought to invite the Planning and Zoning Committee to come and discuss it with us in an open meeting. And I think we need to decide whether we accept what the zoning and planning said, or if we choose to go further. I will concur with you, Commissioner, that I've heard multiple people tell me horror stories about things that happened with houses that were improperly built and they didn't know about it until after an incident occurred. I've also heard from a lot of people who said, how dare you tell me what to do with my own property? And I understand both sides of this. I've been misquoted as saying that it's the government's responsibility to maintain safety and take that decision away from people. Of course, that is not a true statement. The true statement is government does protect people. That's why we have speed limits and fire trucks and ambulances and everything else. And if we feel that, for the safety of our citizens, the building code is a good idea, we ought to pursue it. If we don't, we ought to let it drop. So I would like to just see it on another agenda item so that the people and invite the planning and zoning folks to come in and explain to us why they're opposed to it. We've heard from multiple people who are opposed to it, and I fully appreciate that. I think we ought to hear from some people who are in favor of it on the other side to help us formulate what we want to pursue, whether we want to put it to the public or not.
I guess my only issue is the time factor, and that being that we have 2 out of the 4 meetings coming up tomorrow and Wednesday, Jay. And it just takes time to coordinate these meetings, especially with planning and zoning. So, I don't know, I guess I'm going to ask if you could contact planning and zoning and just see how quickly they could act in getting a another meeting today.
When is the actual register regular election? November, do you know, the
7.
7th? And why do you have to have it 2 months in advance?
Because it's state law.
As a state law?
It's
Okay.
on statute.
Okay,
And
that's
it
fine.
takes that long
That's
to
why I'm
get
asking.
Everything
Okay.
on there.
I'm gonna throw another one out there, folks. Instead of worrying about this as a commissioner agenda item, why don't we just schedule a workshop next week or week after?
I think that's
Let's
fine.
get in and put it on the calendar and move forward with it.
I think that's great. And then once
Yes,
we-
sir, Mr. Patterson.
Well, for me personally, I'm kind of tired of workshops. You need a hearing,
Okay, call it a hearing, sure.
which needs to be advertised in your legals, and then move on.
Now, how do you,
And
you've got a lot of experience, how would we, what's your suggestion? Do we have it in here then? What's the protocol that you followed in the past?
well, as long as it is announced in the legals, I believe it's 2 weeks prior. Like the planning commission meets tomorrow. They won't meet again regularly until September.
But is that the planning and zoning's requirement for two publications?
That's off the zoning resolution.
Right, but the commissioners that's under
If you're,
auspices.
I believe if you have, a hearing has to be an agenda item that's advertised. Where a workshop,
No, I agree with you, we want to have this, and what do you want to call it, a hearing? Okay.
I would like to propose that on a week from tomorrow, that would be August 8th, we have a workshop, invite planning.
I wouldn't be in attendance.
Okay. Does the 9th work for you?
Nope. The 10th, can do.
No, on the 10th?
Where are you planning on having this? Because there's court all day, so,
I anticipate this being an evening meeting.
okay.
I think that's the best opportunity for folks to come to it rather than during the middle of the afternoon. When are you looking at? Yes, go ahead.
and one more thing, if it is put on the ballot, are the people in West Cliff Incorporated, Silver Cliff Incorporated, going to be voting
course.
on this issue?
Of course, they're citizens of Custer County.
I think I don't think that's right. I think it's a county,
It's county issue.
because the town's already.
Just-
So they're not,
counties.
yeah, that wouldn't be, it would just be
And what
county.
about landowners that are not residents? They would not be able to vote, right?
Registered voter.
Registered voter. So I guess on the 10th, you're talking about the 10th, but who is conducting this meeting? BOCC?
I think it would be a
If you want to step up and move along, we either let planning and zoning do it, or if we want to move along faster with what they have for their schedules, it's certainly within our auspices to do it as a board of commissioners. Yes, sir.
What precipitated all these changes that need to be done to the building codes? What started all this? I know the building codes in this county are poor at best,
We have no building
There
code.
is no building.
There,
but the commissioner or the county should be watching out for these people that come into the county that build these houses.
I'll answer the
Because
question.
my house is, it's a mess. And I'm getting this like 25 years. Well, the house was built, 35 years ago. Now it's 23 years. I'm into it and I'm starting to find that these people were horrible contractors. And I'm finding out that they did the right thing, went to the court office, filed all the forms of what they did, what they built, and there was no,
inspection?
for the lack of a term, yes. I had to hunt for my septic system. They had no idea. It was a clown drawing. And I'm like, well, aren't there, I know there's building codes statewide that have to be.
We have electrical and we have sewage. That's it.
Plumbing.
The state has no
Well-
building code either.
There has to be, I know there's a fine line you have to follow with all this, but
Let-
we are implementing a code that is going to be so egregious on people that it's going to cause problems? Or is it going to be something that's going to grandfather people in so they don't get hammered by this on the other end?
I'll respond to your questions. Let me start by the first question was, how did this all start? I brought it up, and the way I brought it up was after the fire in Junkins Loop, the question of flooding, which we had a significant report on today, came up as a real possibility. Questions came up with the residents down there on, do you have or can you obtain flood insurance? And what we learned is that flood insurance, unless you have a building code in the county, becomes very, very expensive.
Yeah,
Because
I found that out.
if it's a building code, if there's a building code, FEMA will underwrite it. So insurance companies will help defray the cost. If not, you have to go to an independent like Lloyd's of London at a very significantly higher cost. That got me thinking, wait a minute, why do we not have a building code? Then I talked around and I asked people, I started with builders. I said, what do you think? Every one of them said, I built a code. But, and then they would name 2 or 3 people who don't build a code. I'd ask the people who they say don't build a code, and of course they say they built a code. And what I found was that we really had some issues here. So I went and I investigated further. Silver Cliff and West Cliff, who both follow a minimal building code. And I want to stress that. It's the 2006 International Building Code. There is a 2016 and 2017 International Building Code, but they don't follow it because it is overly restrictive. What the 2006 looks at is your roof attached properly? Are the studs in the walls put in properly so once the sheetrock's up, if an inspector looks, they can't see what's behind the wall? Is the slab, if it's on a slab, is it the right thickness and have the right kind of rebar in there? And is the whole thing screwed down and attached to the base properly? It's a minimal safety issue. So there's multiple inspections that take place. It starts at once the foundation's done, and the studs are done, and the walls are done, and the ceiling's done. Just to answer your question specifically, the state has plumbing inspector from the state that comes out and inspects. There is an electrical inspector that comes out. The county does, on its own, already have a septic system inspection. So those are already inspected. What's not inspected is the integrity of the building of your house. And the problem is someone moves out or dies and someone else takes the house over. They have no idea how that house was built. We had this year more than one roof that is either blown off or partially blown off. When our high winds were there, insurance companies come in and say there were no hurricane strengths. Okay? So that's what really precipitated the discussion. Maybe we ought to have a minimum building code in the county just like we do in Silver Cliff and West Cliff. So that's kind of how that started.
There's another channel to that. This goes back 4 years ago, I guess. Some of you remember when Christy Coleman was kind of put on the spot regarding the designation of floodplains in the county. There was a push to do this and then decided not to. Right now, if we were to have and heaven forbid, but if we were to have a disastrous flood in Wetmore, and we lost a number of homes down through Wetmore, none of those homes would be eligible for any type of a federal assist because there's no floodplain designation, and in order for FEMA to assist, my understanding is we have to have building codes. Now, I don't know what all the protocols are. I don't know if you had to initiate those afterwards. I don't know what those are, but that was again one of the reasons that this thing has come back up, because the insurance companies wouldn't touch those folks in Whitmore except Lloyd's of London for insurance. So
Can't even get fire insurance up here.
right.
A lot of places.
So I mean, those are just
Because of certain things, you don't have a well, blah, blah, blah.
the community
But the
questions
thing
that have
is,
come forward, and
This building code issue,
and
I understand it totally. But will the rest of us be grandfathered in if we're not up to code and it's just not like that.
everything that we enact my understanding is that has a grandfather clause to it. In other words, if we make a change tomorrow that you have to drive a white pickup, everybody's got brown ones and blue ones can still drive them up and down the road because they're grandfathered in. So whatever existing structures we have, you are grandfathered in. Now we may get into, maybe you can help in this area, but we may get into an area now if you go for a major remodel on a building, at what point then do you have to remodel the building codes? And I'm just bringing this to you from my experience in other counties and in other states. But we don't have a building code. We don't have any of this stipulated.
Can I just add, it's not just the building code, it's the fire code also. The IBC 2006, it's the IBF, International Building Fire Code 2006, that was adopted in both towns, is also part of the discussion that we're trying to see if that's something that the county ought to adopt also. And that is to make sure that, for example, a wood burning or pellet stove is not too close to the exterior wall, and the stovepipe is a double, not a single. You know, those kind of things that are just human nature that a builder who's not scrupulous may try to cut corners and say they'll never know, and who knows if I didn't do it exactly the way it's supposed to be. So yes, it's a safety and a health issue in my opinion, but again, it's offset by what's a person's constitutional right to do whatever they want with their land, and you know, that's a very valid argument, and that's why I feel this question should not be made by 3 people. It shouldn't be made by the populace. All the people should vote on it. And that has not been approved by us. We haven't even discussed it, other than like I'm saying right now. But that's kind of how I feel. Does that kind of help your answer, your question?
Why not?
Well, I don't get it.
I have nothing more to add to it. It's just,
I sense that your first question was, is there a grandfather clause? I suspect
yeah, I
that was
don't
your
want to
first
be burdened with this later
concern.
when I get older and invalid, and I'm not going to build anymore, or I have to fix this, or I have to do this, or I have to take my light bulbs down because I'm getting involved in this thing. I've been left alone for the most part. I live up in the hills. I don't want to be bothered with people. I don't build or put stuff up that's a distraction to anybody, but to my wife. Anyway. Whether it's the forum for it or not, I hear things about you people. I hear things about everybody else, but mostly about you guys. And what I hear is, okay, whatever. I take it with a grain of salt, for the most part. I voted for none of you.
I appreciate you being here.
And I have just gotten to the point, I'm tired of arguing with the television. I'm tired of fixing things around the house that keep coming up because of this. It's like 35 years later and it's starting to fall apart, and I'm fixing this and that and the other thing. From what I'm hearing, it really galls me, whoever's causing this, but your employees, county employees, are not allowed to do what they think is right without threat of retribution from the commissioners.
What are you referring to, sir?
Well, they can't vote in this recall. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm
That's
hearing.
bullshit. Excuse me, let me rephrase that. Excuse me.
That's what I'm hearing.
Every citizen.
And I don't know what the truth is anymore, because I hear you went on, all 3 of you went on a platform of this. And we're finding out that it's over here. And it's so far right of what everybody else is thinking that
I apologize.
I'm just blasting off here.
I
and I'm
appreciate you coming and asking us and listening to us. More of our citizens need to do that so that you're one-on-one with us, and it's not the hearsay from the Sentinel. or from Mr. Johnson?
I don't believe anything I read anyways anymore.
Okay.
I can't even believe what I see in my eyes,
Yeah.
with my own eyes, or what I hear. But I don't know you people. I probably never will socialize with you guys. I don't socialize with anybody. Mainly because people are, well, they are what they are. And it takes a while to get to know people. And I don't know you people from anywhere else. I don't know your politics, because I hear one thing that's over here, and nothing balances out. The only thing I can see is what you do. And if I don't see action with the words, then I have nothing for you. I'm only one person, but I've gotten to the point in this county, I've been here 23 years. I've seen some nasty things go on in this county and I think that's pretty much what turned me off of the whole thing, is there's no change to it because it's ingrained. I understand and I can appreciate some of the things that are being proposed. Building codes, yeah, they need some of them. I don't know what they're going to be, how restrictive they're going to be, or how wide. It's wide open now. Anybody can come in here and put something up, put two nails together, some boards. But some of the things I keep hearing they're contrary to what I'm thinking in my head. Very contrary. You're muzzling all your employees. What I'm hearing, I hear that you come from, you're bringing in ideas that are trying to improve the county. God bless you. Improve the county to what end? We're not a big city. We don't need big city ideas. I fought with a homeowner association up in Rosita Hills for years because they kept trying to bring in these ideas from the city. And that just didn't fly. And they had 12 people, well actually it was 9, that stood over us like lords and said, no, this and this and this and this will happen. No. We ended up going to court over it to fight these people to stop this nonsense. It was ridiculous, the rules that they had imposed upon the rest of us over there. And I understand what you're saying. It's my property. I can do what I want. If I'm going to be stupid, oh well, I get burned down. Common sense is not it's not running amok anymore. It's gone.
But does your burning down of your house that you didn't take care of, and that fire spreads to your neighbors?
I understand. Oh, I understand that completely. No,
Okay,
I
that's not-
understand that.
I apologize.
I'm sorry, but we need to maintain.
I understand that totally. I really do. That's why, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to call somebody. If I don't know how to do it, I'll call somebody. Hey.
The issue before the board here was whether you're going to schedule a meeting and have the planning commission come. This is just going on,
It is.
Thank
you
you.
know,
And I'm
way
answering-
beyond what we need to talk
But
about
It's
today.
building code, and like you were saying, it's a workshop, or how you're going to, that's what's.
Okay, let them schedule something. You can show up at that and talk some
Well,
more
I
if you
understand
want
that. I thought this is what this is for.
to. No, it's not today.
We're going to move on, but I want to make one comment to you, and I apologize for the vulgarity. But one thing that I will not tolerate in any way, shape, or form is infringement upon an individual's right to vote.
Okay, well.
And whatever
that's-
you do, whatever your job is, anybody that infringes on that right is wrong. And I will not condone, and if the people in the courthouse have every right to an opinion, they have every right to vote. I think what part of what you're hearing, and I don't want to get in a long discussion, but we've had on the books for a long time that we have annual reviews of employees. That was on the books before we come in. And in most businesses and in university systems and stuff I've been with, we have some kind of a review. And that review is not intended to be derogatory. It's not intended to be a form of punishment. It's intended to identify some strengths and weaknesses, and if we can help an employee gain some more skills and advance their job would be the purpose. And that may have been part of what you're hearing. But back to where we were, and I'll be glad to discuss this more, but back to where we were was we want to set a date. And I want you to be there if you can, to express your opinions. What date would be reasonable?
I think we talked about August 10th in the evening.
I'm good with the 10th.
Okay, shall we go August the 10th for a hearing, Ken? Let's see. We can get in this week, but we can't make the 2 weeks for next week, but I think as long as from the county commissioner, as long as we do it with a week's
This
notice.
isn't
is
a planning
sufficient.
commission meeting, this is a board of county commissioners meeting.
Yes.
They
So
need
that's-
2 weeks, we don't.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
And it would be, the agenda item would be to have the planning commission come, so you could ask them what their reasoning was in an open session.
Right.
And then, and the
Public
public
comment.
would also be there and there'd be public
Public
comment. That
comment.
would be the only agenda item for that particular meeting.
So what constitutes a hearing?
We don't.
It's a
That's not-
meeting.
Yeah, it's a meeting, it's not a hearing for the BOCC.
I mean, the hearing, planning commission has hearings where they have testimony. We're not having testimony, we're having people address the
Discuss.
board. Yes.
Does that make sense to you, Ken?
Yeah. What I'm interested in is the advertisement of the meeting hearing.
If you want to, you can put a notice in the
That's all
paper
we
as
have
well.
to do is put a notice.
Well,
in
just
and
a
say
regular notice, but if you wanted a small ad besides, like I think you did for one of the other public meetings you had, but
All right. At
We
this
can
time,
work with Brenda on that.
I will entertain a motion that we have an additional commissioner hearing regarding building codes to be held on the 10th of August at 7 p.m. in the courthouse.
So moved.
You second it?
Second.
Do you have any comments?
Nope.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed same sign, motion carries. This will be noted on our commissioner's item and will be published in the local media. Excuse me, folks, I took my throat. All right, anything else that you had on the code that you want to talk about?
So just a point, what time and where?
7 o'clock in the courthouse?
Okay.
The courtroom.
Courtroom. Sure, if you find the courthouse, you can find the meeting. All right, next item on the agenda, we have, I'm gonna juggle it just a moment if I may. The next item is review of vouchers and checks. I have reviewed the vouchers, and I find no changes or questions at this point in time. Have either of you seen anything as you're questioning?
Nothing to question.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the vouchers.
I'll make the motion to approve the vouchers as stated by our director.
Okay,
I'll second the motion.
made and approved, motion made and seconded to approve the vouchers for payment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Brenda, if you want to take those over to Donna,
Sure.
we're ready to go. Okay, can we get through this liquor license fairly quickly? I think we've got our auditors out there in the hall for the 1031.
Okay, so we have 2 liquor license for special events permits. One of them is for the Cowboy Gathering, and both of these events are held at Painted View. The Cowboy Gathering is August 19th and 20th. And
Thank you, sir.
it is sponsored by Chamber of Commerce, and they have all of their paperwork in order here, and their money also.
I'd just like to make a statement that I know that both of these events that she's discussing are going to be held at a Painted View Ranch, and I will not be voting.
I make a motion, we approve the special event permit at the Painted View Ranch on, what was the date, I'm sorry?
18 and 19
Of
August.
August.
18th and 19th of August.
I'll second the motion. And the discussion, the record will show that Dawn is excusing herself from vote because of potential conflict. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Okay, then the second one is Custer 2020 doing business as the Altitude Community Fitness. This is for that 5K run that they have a permit. And it's held at a Painted View also. And everything there is in order, and they have their money also.
And they want to have booze at a run?
After celebration.
After.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'd have to have it before. I'm sorry.
It's a marathon that they do.
What was the date on that one?
Look about right in the middle.
September.
Yeah, it's in September too. I can't.
21st?
Okay, I got it.
Is that this the date? Nope, that's the date of birth. No, I'm sorry.
Look up. Right, no.
17th.
17th. Yeah.
September 17th.
September 17th, 2017. I make a motion to approve this event for a special events permit. Is there a second?
A second.
Any question, discussion? Commissioner Hood has recused herself from the vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion approved.
Okay.
Now, I need to sign these, but you... Okay.
I got a bunch of stuff to use.
Okay, at this time, it is 10:30. We do have some folks out here waiting for us. Do we want to quickly do the...
I was just wondering if you could do the airport real quick, because
Yeah.
all they're doing is giving you some information,
Okay,
and they've been waiting for a while.
at this time, we'll... No,
Agree.
okay, at this time, we'll have the airport report.
Okay. I'll defer to our vice chairman.
That's me. Morning, morning, good morning, sir. Morning, Bob. Morning, Donna. Just wanted to report to you where we are with our fuel system. Unfortunately, yesterday we took a big step backwards and we're right back where we were a week and a half ago. The fuel pump, when you turn it on, pops the breaker. We thought we had that figured out when they gutted the 52 valve, which is a safety valve. We don't really need it in our system because we got redundant systems. They thought they had it figured out because it quit tripping the breaker. The problem we had after that was if you were buying fuel and you put in, you want 10 gallons. It would pump the 10 gallons and give you a receipt for 10 gallons, read the right amount, but the pump didn't stop running. So you could put in 20 gallons or whatever you want, and you paid for 10 because that's what you get billed for, which was not a good idea. So I've been acting as a sort of gas station attendant for the last week and a half or so. Yesterday, I got a call Saturday, and they said they thought they had it figured out. I've been talking to Eaton and with QT Pod, who has our card reader. They talked to each other and they said, we gutted another solenoid that is keeping the pump from shutting off. We need to come back out on Monday or Tuesday and put that back in. Fine. But if you want to do it, all you have to do is take the parts and put it back in to the solenoid. Bob Custer and I went out yesterday and did that. As soon as we turned it on, it started popping the fuse. We said, let's take it apart, put it back to where it was and see if it works. Put it back together again, still popping the fuse.
Fuse or circuit breaker?
Circuit breaker. I called Eaton last night, tried to call Eaton last night, their office, to leave a message for the director. The lady that I got a hold of had no clue who this guy is, but he's the managing director. So I called his cell phone, which I try not to do on Sundays, but I did because this was important, and left him a message, and I've been here, so I don't know if he's called me back. But right now, our system is down totally.
Let me ask you a question. What we're doing is primarily electrical.
That's correct.
Okay, why can't we get another electrician to come in and fix it?
We probably could. But I wanted to bring this to your attention because I don't want to go and ask some other electrician to come in without letting you all know.
And why can't we have have Clint write a letter to this firm saying, look, we gotta fix it? Go ahead, I don't mean to, this is your
That's
firm.
fine. I just want to bring you up to date. Who is it that is on the card?
Rand,
Yeah, I've spoken to him multiple times.
me too.
The last time I spoke to him, I told him if this is not repaired, we're just going to go get it fixed. And we're going to just take the balance off the bill. And he said, well, we'll get it fixed, don't worry about it. Okay.
And he's been real good working with me.
Well, good is fine, but if the system's not working, you can be as nice as you want, it's got to get done. Okay. I mentioned to Dallas multiple times, if we need to, it's going on way too long, get it fixed by hook or by crook. Get another company in, get an electrician in. I mean, Dallas has said, not what I said to you.
Yeah.
And I said, we'll take care of the bill by we'll send him a copy of the bill for whatever is in addition to what we're paying. We'll deduct that from what we pay Eaton, and if they want to meet us in court, have at it, okay? I mean, we have to have a reliable, ongoing fuel system. And I've kind of left it in your hands to that point.
Yep.
That's what comes to mind for me is some kind of litigation.
Yeah, well, I didn't, that's y'all's bailiwick, not mine. Mine is to get the system fixed, and I want to just bring you up to date on where we are.
Fixed.
I think we're the point that we as a board have to step into this, take any burden, any liabilities, any headaches off of your shoulders, and we'll be the ones that said, fix it.
We'll get it fixed. Now,
But Bob, you want,
Dallas has
The main thing is that they have not transferred ownership
to us.
the county on that fuel pump.
they've not transferred ownership for what?
To the county
For the fuel pump, they haven't transferred owner. What's the transfer? It's there, it's installed. I mean, that's transfer of ownership. Well, I mean, what are we talking about?
They were talking about that as a final thing, they would transfer ownership from themselves to the county. And I don't know what.
Well, that may be when the warranty takes effect or something, but.
Yeah, I don't know.
For the last 2 weeks, I've asked you to get this fixed.
Yep.
Can we please call whoever it's going to take to get it fixed?
We'll do.
And let's get this off the table. Let's let our pilots come in and fuel up like they're supposed to, with the card reader working the way it's supposed to. And if Eaton can't do it, just tell them to come get their equipment and we'll just change it. I mean, we just cannot allow this to go on. It's been going on, what, 2-3 months now?
Since May 21st.
That's my point.
Actually, since June 12th.
Whatever.
Is there another electrician locally that you're looking to bring in?
If, I'd probably bring JB Wright in, because he's pretty much
Your
up
help
on
would do it, I'm sure.
The other thing I wanted to,
Before we leave this,
just,
I would like to formalize this a little bit more. And I'm going to ask this first as a question, and it can become a motion. Is it appropriate for us at this time to have a motion that we are authorizing the Fair Advisory Board to bring in additional electricians to fix the problems, and that somehow that we know what they're going to do. We're giving the official action to do it. So
I'll defer to Clint.
You can do it by motion. I don't think it's really necessary. I think you can just direct them to go ahead and do that.
you're directed then, and you've got a record of it, but you got our permission to do it.
good. The other thing, you all might want to beat me up on this one, but I got a call from the Sheriff's Department a couple of days ago and wanted permission to use the airport facility on the 9th and the 23rd. I told them what was involved in that, and I told them I wanted time to check with the rest of the board to see if it was okay with them. They all said yes. Because if we don't let them use the facility, where do we got to travel to?
The town south of Colorado Springs.
Yeah.
Security.
Security is where they'd have to go to do this training. So I told him yes, and it's going to be closing the airport on the 9th and 23rd.
So they are asking to use
The
the
airport.
airport facility for training
That's
on
correct.
those 2 days.
That's correct. And I called them and told them it was okay. Y'all can tell us not to. But the school is also doing it on the 10th. And for the same reason, to sort of show that
Just for my own knowledge, what kind of traffic is normally expected on those days?
so both Wednesdays. Wednesdays not,
Pretty dead.
Okay.
yeah, it's practically dead.
I personally don't have a problem with this. I mean, it sounds like a major inconvenience to have the...
What kind of training is this?
Traffic,
Driver training.
driver training,
Driver training?
yes.
I
So,
thought we might have the bomb squad and the ATF and everybody else
No.
out there for some kind of a hostage situation in Cessna 170.
and the other thing I wanted to bring to everybody's attention, just for their education, is here is what an official NOTAM looks like.
Thank you.
And I can't tell you how many people I have had tell me and other people that there are no NOTAMs being filed. There's only one place that officially you file a NOTAM with, and that's with the FAA. And they give you a number. And that is where all of them are. Now, there are a lot of other sites that carry NOTAMs, AirNav, FlightAware, a lot of other places that will publish NOTAMs if you belong to the organization, which costs money. And I'm not in favor of doing that, because if anybody wants to know if there's a NOTAM, they go to the FAA to find it.
Explain NOTAM to me.
Notice the airman.
Right, but what would that in? Like we're closed those 2 days you'll announce?
That's right.
That would be a NOTAM.
That would be a NOTAM. Or if there's something significant they ought to know about.
We got 2 foot of snow on the runway.
Right. 2 foot snow on runway, no fuel available, whatever it might be. You file a NOTAM. And I do that, and I keep them up to date. You can see filed one day, and immediately after it expired, we file another one. So those are up to date. So if somebody says there's not a NOTAM out there, check with the FAA to see if there really is.
Thank you for bringing this to our
Thank you.
attention.
Anything else?
No, sir.
Good job. Thank you. And let's get that fuel thing up and running, and I don't want to hear about it.
Thank you for all the
You will
support.
hear about it
Will
again.
you send us an email
Last I
so
heard,
we
everything
know
was great.
what the results are?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you,
I'll send you all.
Bob, for your extra efforts, and Dallas and the rest of your advisory board. We appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you.
At this time, I would like to move on. On the agenda, let's get the audit report in, if we can.
They're out in the hall.
Brenda, you want to call in our audit, please?
Sam.
Watch your toes.
Just making
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you for coming. While they're getting situated, I'm going to visit the restaurant.
Okay, we're in a 5-minute recess as everybody comes in and gets situated. Hello, Mr. Staff. All right, I will now reconvene the meeting at 10:43. The next item on the agenda will be the audit report from Sam Bernardo. And Sam has been our audit firm for a long time, and we welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Nice to meet you both.
Same here.
I'm going to do kind of a walk through this document. So kind of explain what some of the statements mean, the reporting conventions, and where you kind of find things within the document if you're looking for information of one kind or another. And then as we go, hopefully I can respond to any questions that you might have. So we kind of literally take it from the top here. Pages 1 and 2 are the auditor's opinion letter or auditor's report. It is what we now refer to as an unmodified opinion. We used to use the term unqualified some years ago, but that's changed. Unmodified, and it is the easiest way to think of that is that it means that we think the financial statements as they're presented here fairly present financial position and results of operations. So that's a positive thing. One thing just to point out that is not in here is in the years where we're subject to the requirements of the Single Audit Act, there's additional reports that have to be issued on compliance and internal controls. And those are required anytime we have expenditures of federal funds. The rule now is exceeding $750,000. Used to be just a couple years ago $500,000, which we were really kind of always right on the cusp there. But at $750,000 this year, we fell below that threshold slightly, so those were not required. So just for frame of reference, if you look back to old reports, that's the reason. One of the statements here, you'll notice it shows revenues from federal sources of about $743,000. We're not quite as close to that $750,000 as you might think, because that includes some federal sources that don't have to be included. Okay, so that in our case that's a couple $100,000. So we're really about $200,000, maybe $225,000 away from that threshold, and that's something we just test for each year. So if we happen to be over that in the given year, then we extend our testing as required under the Single Audit Act, and of course we would include the reports as necessary. So really nothing you have to do about it. Just be aware that it's not there for this year, and that's the reason why. Pages, they're entitled or labeled, I guess I should say, with lowercase Roman numerals 1 through 7, and that's the management's discussion and analysis. And that really is a piece that comes from the county's personnel. So you know how it's generated now. Typically what we do is we update this for dates and dollar amounts that are extracted from the basic financial statements. And then we ask, in this case, Donna to review it for any verbiage that we might want to update. But the purpose of that, part of the document, is for a layperson that doesn't have the time, the interest, or the energy to read, understand, or digest all the remaining financial statements. They could read that 6 or 7 page kind of synopsis and get an idea of where the county gets its money from, what we spend it on, and at least in general terms, whether our financial position is stable, improving, or deteriorating. So it's a required element. Beyond that, I didn't really intend to go over it in detail because the information is in the basic financial statements, which you're going to spend a little more time on. The first of those statements are included on pages 3 and 4, what we now refer to now for the last, this is not brand new, 10 years or more, sort of financial reporting conventions that are called government-wide financial statements. There's a statement of net position and a statement of activities. So the things to understand about these two statements is that they blend all of the activities of the county, all the funds. We don't think of them as separate funds like you do for your internal financial reporting or budgeting purposes. They're kind of all smooshed. Consolidated is the technical term. And in that process, we also recognize assets and liabilities that are not shown on the governmental fund financial statement. So most importantly, in our case, it would be property and equipment. Capital assets specifically is what it's entitled on this page. And we also include a depreciation convention. So you might recall from looking at your fund financial statements, there's no depreciation. What we account for and budget for is capital outlay expenditures as an alternative. But in the government-wide, we sort of convert it to full accrual accounting. By doing that, we pick up those long-term assets. We recognize an element of depreciation. And on the liability side, we report long-term liabilities. If we looked at your fund statements, which we will in just a moment, we focus on current liabilities, most importantly things like accounts payable and warrants payable, for example. And here we include the non-current liabilities as well. So if you go about 2/3 of the way down that page 3 there under non-current liabilities, you'll see 3 items identified. Landfill closure costs, $481,000, and so what that number comes from is essentially an annual update of the engineer's estimates of what the closure and post-closure costs would be for the landfill that we're presently operating, and then adjusted for a percentage of completion, because obviously we haven't filled all the trenches at this point in time. It's long-term because we don't know exactly when those closure costs are going to be incurred, and of course the post-closure costs, we have an obligation to cover that for 30 years. So this number is a net present value figure estimated primarily by the engineer's estimates. Capital leases are non-current, and of course, as you know, that's the only thing that we have that is kind of like a debt. It's not, to be a little bit careful about those terms in a governmental setting, as you know, because it's not bonded debt. The county does not have, nor as long as I've known you, ever had any general obligation debt.
Now, this capital leasing would be things like
it's equipment purchases, essentially what it.
Stuff like that. That's
probably not office equipment. It would be vehicles.
All the vehicles.
Would be vehicles and machinery typically.
So the trucks that we bought on the lease purchase plan would reflect here then.
Exactly. Exactly. And what we do with this in the year that you enter into such agreement, in your governmental fund, so in our case we would typically record that in the capital improvement fund, sometimes road and bridge, typically those 2 funds, occasionally the general fund. But essentially, what we record is the total cost of the item that we're purchasing, acquiring, or intend to use for this lease period, and the corresponding present value of all the lease payments. But that's the only place it gets reported. The asset and liability are not on those governmental fund statements. They only appear on this government-wide when we blend that in. So we are allowed to finance equipment, those kind of purchases, as you know, as long as we have capital lease obligations properly constructed. Properly meaning most significant difference in a governmental setting, at least in Colorado, is we have to have what we generally refer to as a non-appropriation clause, meaning that if the board were to decide for some reason not to appropriate the funds to continue that lease obligation, there would be no further sort of debt-related obligation to the county. Probably don't get to use the equipment anymore either, but nonetheless you have a way to sort of back out of it. You can do this with new or used equipment, either one, or facilities.
We're finding we buy some used equipment sometimes to get more value than we can with the depreciation.
Yeah.
I have to have a roadmap to find lunch. But we had a page here that just showed our net assets, our net. What page? Here we are. You had 2 pages that we just started with.
Those right at the beginning, Bob, were 3 and 4. Page 3 and 4. The statement of net position, and I sort of didn't get beyond.
Okay,
that.
Does any value show on this page from these liabilities or the accrued equity?
Right. If you go to that page 3, I think this is your question.
Yeah.
and go up from the bottom about a third of the way.
Yeah, so that shows.
Non-current liabilities.
Yeah,
That's where that
I'm
shows.
trying to tie back.
Yeah, and there's a footnote we'll get to in a little bit that gives the details of what was outstanding in the remaining term. But, those are the things that sort of dominate that statement of net position and how it differs from your balance sheets on your governmental fund statements. Yeah, flip it over.
Yep.
I can tell you that because I
Here's
do that
where
all
you
the
are,
time.
right here.
Yeah.
Go ahead, I'm
I'll
sorry to
do, no,
interrupt you.
you're fine. I'll do my best to
But,
tell you what page I'm looking at too, so we stay together, hopefully. But real quickly, if you continue down that page, you see that the fund equity now is entitled net position. So that's kind of what's left over. All the assets less all the liabilities.
did you
Yes,
talk
sir.
about compensated absences?
I didn't.
Is that vacation time?
Yes, it's based on your personnel policies. Employees accumulate some
Yeah.
leave time,
Yeah.
and that's the estimate of that leave time at their current rates of pay at December 31st. So, yes.
Can I ask a question if I might, please?
Yes, sir.
The $7,818,000 that is the net total
position.
net position at the end of 2016. Do you know offhand where, or is it in here, where that compares with the end of 2015?
Yes, I do.
Good.
I do. And that's found on page 4. So we just have to flip the page there.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. No, you're fine. I want you to stop me whenever a question occurs to you. This statement of activities is another of the government-wide statements. It's the second of the two. And remember, it blends these full accrual accounting concepts and depreciation as well. The thing that's a little odd here is we start with expenses in these functional categories. And then we subtract from it program revenue. In our case, charges for services and grants, both operating and capital grants. If it's under the capital grant column, that just means the grant was dedicated for the specific purpose of acquiring or constructing long-term assets, so equipment, facilities. And then in that column that says net expense in brackets or revenue, it's not the furthest column to the right, but one just to the left of it. We get under governmental activities, all those numbers in brackets. So what that's really telling you is in these functional categories, this is the net cost after the program service revenue that has to be financed by other sources. And of course, as you know, those most significant other sources in cases of most local governments is taxes of some kind. So in our case, they're ad valorem, property tax, specific ownership tax, sales tax, and so on. So the sum of all those resources is $3,155,000. And to answer your question, sir, those revenues exceeded our net costs, net program costs, by $855,000. So that would signal an increase in our net equity. It will tell you that what tends to cause that to be a little higher than the norm, because if we went back to 2015, we would have had an excess of a couple $100,000, as I recall, is the column that says capital grants and contributions. So here's how the accounting works for that. We have to include the grant revenue as revenue, but when we expend it for the capital items that it was intended for, those end up on the balance sheet rather than as an expense. So you kind of inflate the profit, so to speak, in a year where you have more activity in that capital grant column. And this year we did, because that item that says $306,924, that was all grants related to the community building project in Wetmore. And of course we don't have that happening every year. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You got it. Before I go on to the next section, I just want to tell you that I focused on primary government, so that's all the things that you think of as the county's activity with the exception of E911. E911 was created by intergovernmental agreement some probably 20 years ago plus, and we're required to blend that into our financial statement as what we call a discretely presented component unit. So little balance sheet for the E911 appears on page 3, and the statement of activities that we just looked at, essentially its net of its revenues and expenses in that furthest column to the right on page 4. Okay?
Now, does this show what we have in that E911?
Like what? How much money?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Let's go back there.
Because we're going to have to make a major expenditure
Yeah,
next
and
year,
I
too.
understand we've been trying to accumulate some resources for that for a while, but how it stood at the end of last year, so December 31st, if you go to page 3, we had cash accumulated, cash in the bank, $244,612. A little bit of receivables just from the normal billing cycle. So the cash and receivables, I guess we're going to look at it that way. It's just a little over $250,000, $253,000. The equipment that we have already been using and placed in service net of depreciation is that $104,000 figure that's right below that. So that, while it's included in our assets, it's not a financial resource that we can appropriate for spending. So the short answer is approximately $250,000 at the end of last year.
Here's something that was higher than that. I'm just trying to take one set over here and reconcile over here.
I understand.
We're looking to increase that request.
Yeah, by raising the fees, but I thought we had more than that in the back, because we're looking at 500,000 more. Thank you, Sam. Go ahead.
That's quite all right. That's what I want you to do if you have a question. Okay, pages 5 through 9, or 8, I think. Pages 5 through 8 are the governmental fund financial statements. Now this begins to look a little more familiar because the accounting here is in line with what you see in your internal financial statement. It's not the conversion to the government-wide that I just explained. What's presented here in columns of their own are the general fund and major special revenue funds. So they're not major because I think they're more important. It's a mathematical test. And I won't go through all the mechanics, but essentially the funds that have more money in them or have more dollars going through them are considered major. You can see we have 3 of those: road and bridge, the public welfare, and capital improvement funds. And then the column that says other governmental funds, that's all the other funds that you budget for and account for that are combined into that total. But of course, the total doesn't mean a lot to us from a management standpoint. What means something to us is, how you account for those. And so the detail is provided in combining financial statements that are way back on pages 33 and 34.
On the extension office funds of 34,000, and then we had a decrease. No, I'm reading this same. We need to understand, Donna, what those funds are. But there's some monies I think the extension had on hand from programs.
I don't know
Charge for
until,
books,
well,
charge.
until, I guess we'd have to go back and look at this detail.
I'm just
Yeah.
making a point.
Yep.
Go on.
I'll go back and revisit that. I just kind of want to
Keep going.
tell
So
you a
you're
little bit
saying-
about the construction of the
Okay.
statements here. So
So the backup is on page 33.
yeah, in that other governmental funds, if you flip back to 33, then you see the detail and separate columns for all the other special revenue funds. So in our case, it's the contingent fund, the conservation trust fund, EMS, the airport, and the lodging and tourism funds. Okay. So those are combined, and the only reason that they're handled in that way is they don't satisfy this mathematical test to be presented separately in the front part of the financial statements. But this
So-
gives you a way to look at the detail.
Your figure on tourism is what's in the bank on the 31st of December?
If you look at page 33, yes, it's two things. So the first line at the top, cash held by the county treasurer, 38,617. That's what was there at December 31st.
Okay.
And we had some receivables, which were from the tax collections, of course. In this case, that would represent 2016 activity where the money doesn't filter back through. It goes to the state and then back to us. So by the time it gets back to us, we're 60 days down the road. But that receivable is recognized on that line. So, but just cash at that point, that would be that 38,617 figure that's right at the top.
So, with regards to tourism, when they go to budget, when we looking as commissioners looking at that, that's always going to happen at the end of the year. You're always going to have some sort of dollar that's hanging out there that's going to come back in 60 days.
Yes, and that's
But you don't
going to
have a
be
crystal
true.
ball.
Well, no, we don't know. Obviously, it varies depending on the activity, but the same is true of sales tax. So with those two,
Yep.
how the reporting goes, since that doesn't come directly to the county, it's reported to the state. So you think of, just as an example, vendors collecting this tax. If they collected it in November, they would remit it to the state in December,
Right.
and the state would send it back to us in January. So we're basically always 2 months in arrears on those kinds of taxes. So that's what that represents. So yeah, you do kind of take that into account in budgeting. On the other hand, there's not a great amount of variance from year to year.
Okay.
So if you looked, for example, on page 34, our revenues in that particular fund, since we're talking about the lodging and tourism tax, the tax revenues were $31,932. So if you budget something in that ballpark, it's probably going to be close.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, makes sense.
Good.
Okay. Sorry to make you skip around so much, but here back to page 5, if we may. You'll notice here these statements don't have the fixed assets or the long-term debt. So this is what you're accustomed to seeing. What's on this balance sheet is cash, receivables, and inventory where it applies. We only have inventory recognized in 2 places. Road and Bridge Fund would be one, and the other is in the Airport Fund. Airport essentially representing fuel that's on hand in the fuel tanks at the end of the year.
Are you comfortable with how that's working?
Well, for the first time that I can recall, somebody did stick the tanks this year. So the end of December. So we know we got an accurate read on the quantity. In some previous years, we kind of had to estimate. That was either forgotten or not communicated to county personnel.
And as we're handling this fuel, that's okay with you?
You know, since you asked the question, I'll tell you our margins over the years have been all over the board. All over the board meaning that we would expect the pricing of the fuel to result in a little gross profit to the county. And sometimes it has, but sometimes it has not.
Yeah, in the last couple of years, it should have been because of a 50 cent.
I know that you have been trying to address the pricing mechanism to keep that kind of current and in line with our fuel costs. But when I look back at the data, I still see some kind of ups and downs in there.
From an accounting standpoint, though, you're comfortable with the information that you're getting?
Yes, except I would tell you this. If it were me, I would probably be interested in sticking those tanks a little more often until we're comfortable that the margin we think we're trying to achieve is actually being achieved.
Because your fuel usage can vary dramatically.
Yes, I understand that. And we have some periods where we don't sell much. And
would you like to have an actual stick of the tank once a month?
Well,
twice a month, what would it be?
I would think once a month would be nice, but not less than quarterly, or until you feel comfortable that when you look at your fuel sales in a given period, whether you're going to look at it on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, compared to your fuel costs adjusted by a change in the inventory value. That's the importance of sticking the tanks, isn't just the fuel that you pay for, but the volume that we still have in the tanks changes.
We need to take the gallons that they have left and actually have a stick report.
But they have data. They're accumulating data on an ongoing basis that should give us the ability to monitor.
There's always a ground truth that I like to see, and that's a physical measure.
Well, that inventory can change for lots of reasons. Could be leakage, could be evaporation, could be lots of things.
Are we being realistic with the 50 cents?
I don't know. I would suppose my feeling is there probably should be some margin, not zero.
Not zero.
And we've had periods where it was. So that would be what I would look at. Whether the 50 cents should be a hard and fast rule maybe depends a little on the market at the time, I would guess.
And we're able to, at least currently, I think, Jay, we're competitive with the surrounding airports in terms of fuel costs.
We review all the airports around us, and we try and keep our price towards the average of the others, but a little bit on the higher side, just so, because someone could just fly right over to somewhere else and fill up and fly back and save us up anyway. So we need to be competitive, but we're not going to give it away.
Yeah, I think that's the goal, and we've had our experience looking back is we've had some periods where it was kind of seemed to be working better and sometimes not so much. So the only thing I can say is to get to an answer to understand why we still seem to have those variances is you monitor it a little more closely and see if we can figure out what's causing that. But measuring the inventory on a regular basis is necessary if you're going to have an accurate determination of the fuel costs for a given period.
Okay.
Well, we just found one deal, and we're having all kinds of electrical problems right now. And apparently, there's been an occasion or two where the 10 gallons, the pump would give a receipt for 10 gallons, but the pump wouldn't shut off. Well, that has to be reconciled by a physical measure.
Yeah, and the reason for looking at it more frequently is that if you have oddities like that, it's easier to find if you're looking back 30 days as opposed to looking at a whole year's worth of data.
You got to leak and find it when it's happening, not
precisely
at the end of the year.
Right.
We will adjust to accommodate that. It's not a big deal doing the stick, and I've done it. So we'll just ask them to do it on a monthly basis, and we'll get a report out.
Would you give me some kind of soda? Let me try. Thank you.
Good suggestion, thank you.
Okay. Good. So, if we may, I'm going to wrap up on page 5, but there's a couple things I want to tell you about here. I think the asset and liability section is hopefully clear enough. The fund balances at the bottom, though, I wanted you to focus just on those categories because in our internal reporting we have, we call it fund balance. So, but as you can see here, we have to fragment that into different categories in our presentation. And so I want you to understand what those categories mean. The first is non-spendable. So in our case, the only thing we have that falls in that category is inventory. And it's called non-spendable because it's not cash or receivables, that kind of a financial resource that we could typically think of appropriating for future spending.
So is that number under road and bridge?
That's equal to the inventory at the end of the year. So if you just go up that road and bridge column, you see the inventory in the asset section,
Yes.
137, 385. So that's an element of our fund balance or net assets. And so in this case, the non-spendable is identical to that figure.
Thank you.
I guess I'm just trying to figure out what that inventory is in road and bridge.
Oh, we have all kinds of materials that
Like
they
sand,
use.
gravel.
Pipe, culverts, all that kind of stuff.
So do they do a physical inventory at the end of the year, road and bridge?
Oh yes, they do. Always done a physical inventory, and we do test counts. So
Okay.
we come up here somewhere around December 31st, usually not on that day, and test count the inventory that's here, and there's some at Wetmore as well. So
Understood.
both.
Thank you.
Restricted fund balances represent those amounts that are restricted by some external requirement. So in our case, we're talking about a statutory provision, some provision in the law, or some provision in a contract or grant agreement. So in other words, it specifies what we have to use the money for. In our case, those restrictions are two things. Most importantly, the largest amount of that is the Tabor Reserve. So that's the 3% of annual spending Tabor Reserve. Now, you cannot get that number by looking at the expenditures on page 7 and multiplying by 3% because there are items that are excluded from that base calculation. So for example, one of the common things would be federal monies. So even though we spend them, it's included in our total spending in a given fund, that's not subject to the reserve requirement. So that gets backed out. And there are other examples as well, but that's the most significant in our case. Others would be things such as donations.
Are any other grants other than federal or state grants exempted?
State grants are not exempted. It can be tricky though, because as you know, most of the federal money, not all of it, but the majority of it funnels through the state. So it'll look like it's coming from state of Colorado, but really the funding source is the federal government. Sometimes it's merely a pass-through, where it's all federal money but just passing through the state. Sometimes there'll be a mixture. And the grant documents for each of those programs will tell you how much is that source.
We have a bridge out here, we're crossing, we got to fix in Hermit. And we've got, I'm just going to throw a number, like $130,000 from the state. And that is federal pass-through monies because we've got all kinds of paperwork that has to accompany it. That would be perhaps exempt from that, Tabor?
If it's federal source money, it would be exempt from the reserve requirement. That's exactly right. Yes.
So when you talk about donations being exempt from that 3%, we don't get very many donations.
Yeah, we don't get lots, but we get some. And when we do, we get to exclude them. That's not a great big item in most local governments, frankly. The other two that are a little more prominent, though, that do happen from time to time, is if we have a sale of county property, the sale proceeds don't have to be included. The sale proceeds and subsequent expenditure of those proceeds do not have to be counted in that base, and so therefore we're not reserving a percentage of those funds. And the other would be insurance claims. So if we had property damages, for instance, and we had an insurance claim on that property damage, those proceeds are not subject to that reserve requirement.
Because you're just replacing a loss.
Right. Right. So those are the most significant things. There's a few others, but those are the main ones. The obvious other one would be debt proceeds. We have proceeds of debt and then spend the money. In our case, we're not going to have debt proceeds unless it's either A, approved by the electorate, so the taxpayers have approved the issuance of some debt. In the case of GO bonds, for example, couldn't be issued without that. And capital lease arrangements, similarly. That spending is excluded from that base, or the funding source is excluded from that base. Okay, so long explanation to tell you that in that restricted category of 185,000 that you see on page 5, 179,700 is the Tabor reserve, and the remainder, 6,138, was a little bit of grant monies that we had not fully expended at the end of the year. But of course, as with most grants, we have an obligation to use it for whatever the grant purpose might be.
Now, if we may be, I'm just guessing, but we may be building a justice center. It may be a $5 or $6 million outlay. Part of that money will come from the underfunded courthouse appropriations from the state. Some may be from DOLA. We don't know where else it's going to come from, but all of that can raise our Tabor requirement then, right?
Temporarily, it could. If it's not federal money, it's state money, even state grants. If we get it and expend it in that year, because the spending that's not excludable under one of these rules that I just described is included in your spending base, the reserve requirement would increase. But if you think about it, when we simply use that money for its intended purpose, once we're kind of through that process, the spending will go down, and as the spending goes down, the reserve requirement will go down. So it kind of goes away by itself in a case like that.
Except that you're caught in a short term where you've had increased expenditures and the reserve requirement may affect the cash flow in other areas of the
Well, you could, except that there's a couple things that have been done here to kind of react to that. Number one, we have never had, the county has never had a condition where it did not fully comply with that reserve requirement. So it's been in compliance since that became part of the law in 1992, without exception.
Do we monitor that quarterly?
No.
Should
we be? Boy, I don't think so. I really don't think it's necessary.
I mean, what's the repercussion if December 31st?
If you were short for some reason?
Yeah, what's that repercussion?
2 to 5.
We don't even want to joke about stuff like that. Well, the repercussion is you have to remedy the shortfall. That really is the answer. And the remedy could be a couple of things. It could be that we come back into compliance merely by, getting a year beyond that spend down. So the reserve requirement goes down, and therefore we're back in compliance. But if that weren't going to be the case, then we would have to find in our budget some additional monies to appropriate to restore that reserve to the 3% amount. Now, one of the things that was done here some years ago is, as is kind of commonplace at the onset of this Tabor requirement, governments didn't know where to sort of reserve for it. There's no requirement that you reserve for it in any specific fund, like we think of general fund, road and bridge, and so on. So they tended to put it somewhere wherever they had some equity. But some years ago, the commissioners at that time decided that each fund would recognize its share of that Tabor reserve based on its own spending. So this is spread out amongst all the funds at this point that would have a tabor reserve requirement, which serve to relieve a little of the pressure on the general fund at that time.
To my knowledge, and you're going to have this answer, for me being a newbie, we really haven't done any strategic planning or savings for any of our departments as a whole, and what this county needs. If we go through our budget process and start saving some pennies, could that be an allocation if we ever were in a bind, if we started putting money in there? And are we restricted in any fiscal year by putting in whatever we can? Or I guess I'm wondering, because I'd like to be a squirrel and start saving for things that we know are coming up, like we've got major software issues, we've got a phone system. I mean, these are things that have never been planned for. And I'd like to know legally in our budget process where we can put that.
There's several issues intertwined there. So let me try
dictionary.
let me try to approach it this way and
Okay.
see if this makes some sense to you. First of all, just focusing on the tabor requirements, there's no requirement that you recognize that in any specific fund.
Okay.
You just got to have
You
it
just
somewhere.
have to have it somewhere. So that's
And there's no requirement that those funds be segregated, for example, into a separate bank account that says this is our tabor reserve. You just got to have it at the end of the year. So there's some flexibility there.
But this is labeled restricted, so this is being pulled from other funds?
No, we just recognize the amount of the restriction. It's not segregated. It's sort of commingled, I guess,
Okay.
is a better way to think of it.
All right.
And a part of all of the funds that are held by the county treasurer. So you do have some flexibility. Now, to address your question, let's suppose that you began to sort of identify some additional monies out of each year's budget and said, well, we're going to try to save this little bit of extra for some future
A rainy day,
purpose.
like the landfill.
Rainy day, or it could be more specific than that. For example, I have a client that needs $1.2 million to make some building repairs. And they're going to try to set aside $300,000 a year for 4 years. But that's not restricted in the sense that I'm talking about here. That's a board designation. Okay?
This is a governmental requirement.
Right. This is an externally imposed restriction. So if you go through a process kind of like you're thinking about, where you may identify some additional money trying to save it for some future purpose, and all of you as the board decide that's what you'd like to use it for, you can change your mind. So maybe priorities change for some reason or whatever. Or, given your question, what if we encountered a year where we began to save that money, but then for some reason we were short on the tabor reserve? Can we redirect that to say we covered the tabor reserve? And the short answer is yes, you may.
Thank you.
Am I correct that if we have an emergency and we're short of county funds, that we can dip into the tabor reserve and it has to be replenished by the next year?
Yes, and there's some constraints on what constitutes an emergency
I'm thinking of
under the
if we have a
tabor.
massive flood in Wetmore, if we lose a lot of road functions.
Natural disaster would certainly seem to fall under that category. So if we use that money, then as I understand the statute, yes, we're obligated to replenish it in the next budget year. So what if you can't? That would be a question
Then you're going to do your
sometimes.
3 to 5.
That's okay.
Well, you're going to come up with a plan. And what likely would
Big
happen?
thing. Big
I've
thing.
only had, I deal with lots of local governments, but unfortunately I've only had this happen a few times. And what happens is in the audit report, I have to disclose that you might not have enough funds to cover that reserve, and it might be non-compliant with that provision of the law. And you might get a letter back from the state that says, oh, by the way, don't you know you're supposed to do that? And they'll ask you to respond. Sometimes they don't ask anything at all, so I can't tell you why. We're less likely to get an inquiry here than in some settings, unless it were really a huge sum, because we don't have any bonded debt that might look like we could default on an obligation, for example. And so if the financial stress on the county were such that it didn't seem to elevate to that level, they may do nothing at all. But you may have to respond to it, is the question, and the answer would be you give them a plan to how you're going to come up with a plan to get back into compliance.
Well, the one that comes to mind, and I wish there were a couple others here, but as I recall, when they had the flooding in Larimer County, Larimer County went in and did some road emergency repairs and so forth. And they did not adequately document it so that FEMA would reimburse them for it, for Homeland Security. So the county got hung out for a fairly substantial amount of money. Or maybe they'll get reimbursed, but it might take them a year and a half to get the monies back around. I could see where potentially we could get into a situation like that. We got to pay the bill today, the check's in the mail, it's coming to us, but we just haven't got it yet from the feds. And that's where I would think Tabor might be
I guess that's always possible. I'm not real sure how you plan for a catastrophe of that.
I plan for, my attitude planning for the disaster is say, okay, we have a disaster. As a last resort, we've got this over here, this Tabor monies. We're going to have to fix it. And then we say, well, it's going to be reimbursed to us as the county.
Well, that would be the plan that I mentioned. In other words, you dipped into it, we dipped into it. In a case like that, it would seem to satisfy that criteria of being an emergency. And if we were in a position where we could not replace those monies completely by the end of the next budget year, then we may be called upon to explain when we're going to do that. So,
Yeah.
in my experience in the past, it hasn't elevated to anything more than that.
See, we have this contingent fund that we could utilize, and for things like you're talking about, but for the last 2 or 3 years, we haven't been able to designate any of the mill levies in order to increase that amount. See, there's $63,000 in there now. If you decided this budget next budget year to appropriate a quarter of a mil or a half a mil to the contingent fund, then you would be building up, and in 2 or 3 years you'd have $300,000 or $400,000 in there. So that's what.
Is that another thing that has to go on the ballot? To increase that mill?
No, because you wouldn't be increasing it. In John's example, you would be redirecting it. We'd have.
See, you just take part of the general funds.
There you go.
Say you.
Okay.
Right.
But in the
Just
last few years, we
allocate it that
haven't
way.
been able to do that because we haven't had enough. Our expenditures.
And we did do that at some point. It's been several years ago now, and then that was discontinued because we're trying to balance the budget on the general fund side.
Right.
But there is another thing you could do besides that, and that's merely to use it as a savings account and transfer some money from the general fund. So in other words, instead of allocating a specific piece of that property tax revenue, you could just say this year, you're not too long, you're going to talk about 2018's budget, so you could say 2018 budget, we'd like to add $20,000 to that reserve. And we could transfer it from the general fund, and then you wouldn't have to tie it to a specific portion of the mill levy.
Okay.
Where I'm going with this is it's a real world situation right now because we've had everything that's flooding in Wetmore. We've had our crews down there 2 or 3 different times on overtime. Incidentally, you know all about that. We're incurring additional expenses that really aren't budgeted. Now, we have a bridge over here that the state tells us is going to cost $250,000 to put 2 culverts across Great Creek. If that in fact is the case, we have 4 bridges that could fail. So we could have $1 million in 4 bridges across Hardscrabble Creek tomorrow. Well, part of that's going to have to be fixed somehow. And I'm just making the worst case scenario, but I'm trying to, be realistic if we have a wreck.
No, I understand. I mean, I think all the questions are good, and the ways you deal with it is kind of just what you're talking about. You try to save some money where you can. You try to identify places where you can get help, whether it be state or federal funding, maybe grants, maybe other resources. You dip into reserves if you have to, or in some cases, we finance them. So let me give you an example. I had a client that had discovered in the process of remodeling, this happened to be some old school buildings,
Asbestos?
Yes, thank you. Some asbestos issues that they didn't know that they had. And so when you encounter that, you have to fix it. And what they ended up doing is doing a short-term capital lease with the school building as collateral for that lease, and stretched out the payments to a time where they could fit it into their budget.
Okay.
So possibility, financing part of it might be possible, but it would depend on how you do that, because we're not a commercial business that have every option available to us. Some of them have to be taxpayer approved, and that takes time.
Well, I hope we don't have to.
So let's hope we don't have to do that. But some short-term financing or capital lease arrangement might also be another possibility.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I've got to catch up here just a little bit, so we're going to go quick on parts of it. Page 6 is a reconciliation to the government-wide statements, and page 7 is revenues and expenses by each of these funds, general fund and the 4 major special revenue funds. And this, if you scan down this list, just kind of tells us what happened. So let's just look at the general fund. Most prominently in the first column, $3,551,976 in revenues, $33,56 in expenditures. We had an excess of $195,000, so that's a plus. We had outgoing transfers of $15,703. Those are 2 things. A small amount, I'm not real sure what the small amount was for, but I have an idea, of $703 was to Road and Bridge. And what I think that was for is in last year's meeting, well, Bob might remember, we had several funds that had balances payable to one another. And so one of my recommendations was to clear those up. Mm-hmm. And I think this was a part of clearing that up.
Right.
The other 15...
The treasurer brought that up to us too, because we cleared up some things.
Right.
Okay.
So the mechanics that we used is that once those were identified, then the treasurer had to have the board's authorization to move those monies around, yes. The other $15,000 was from general fund to the airport. So those were the 2 outgoing transfers. Net of those transfers, we had a net change in fund balance of $179,000 positive. Road and Bridge was $356 positive. Public Welfare Fund was a slight negative, $6,200. capital improvement was upwards 100,000. And in this this other column, other governmental funds, you'll see it's a negative 93,000, but I'll save ourselves a little time. I'll tell you that all stems from the Emergency Service Fund. And the reason that it was in such a negative is it had some reimbursement claims pending that related back to 2016 that were not received until like April or May. And we only count that as a receivable in these governmental funds if it's collected within about 60 days of the fiscal year end. So if the collection goes out beyond that, even though it might properly be belonging to the previous year, because that's where the spending took place, the recognition of that revenue gets delayed. So if that had come in on a more timely basis, this would have been reduced by about 85,000.
I think that part of that was the Office of Emergency Management and some grant monies we had coming in that took forever to...
It was some grant monies that took forever to collect. That's exactly right.
And I have a question with regard to the Public Welfare Fund. It's been brought to my attention that sometimes, for whatever reason, it could be a payroll glitch. Sometimes duplicate payrolls happen in that area, and you don't see the repercussions of that for 30 to 60 days afterwards. Have you seen that on the books in that area?
Well, it has happened, but let me be clear about, from my perspective, what that means. That does not mean that we paid the employees twice. What that means is we submit data to the state because some of these costs are reimbursed to us, and as a part of that data submission, sometimes there's been a mistake where we included a payroll a second time, and so then that caused the state on an interim basis to fund us to a higher level because it's based on costs, and then when the error is subsequently found and corrected, of course the state takes that money back. So if it's that kind of error that you're asking about, that has happened. What's been done in response to that is we kind of up the reconciliation process.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Have you recommended a different reconciliation? No. Do you need to?
No.
Okay.
I think it's fine. It doesn't seem like it should be very hard, to be honest with you. But let me tell you what. Yeah, it isn't that. It's easy to find if we make a mistake. But there's lots of back and forth stuff between that department and the state.
Okay.
And sometimes the state makes adjustments to those funding amounts without explaining to us why. Okay. And I'm just going to say this. The state doesn't think that they ever make a mistake, but sometimes they do. And so it takes a while to work that out occasionally. But the process that you're talking about is taking place each month, and what we're doing is we're taking the general ledger data, putting it on a spreadsheet, and comparing it to the state submissions. And when there's differences, they're trying to follow up on those as quickly as you can. But I can just tell you, we come in here most of the time. Our field work is in May or early part of June, and so now we're 4 months plus after the end of the year, and some of those little glitches still aren't resolved with the state at that point. So
whose
I don't know why.
responsibility is it? Is it the department's responsibility?
It's the department's responsibility to just do the best that they can to submit accurate data and have a system to proof it. What we can't control is when the state makes adjustments that are inexplicable. And getting an answer from the state as to what it's for is not always easy. And I can tell you that from personal experience, because our staff has tried to follow up on some of these, and they will eventually address it, but
Just the one
not,
red tape.
yeah, not in the time frame that we would normally think is reasonable. They seem to have their own sort of way of thinking of that.
I think the only ones that I'm aware of, Donna, that I think we had a year or two, we had some errors made, I think, in human services that we had to come back and fix.
We did.
And I think that was about the only place we would have seen it. And again, it was just clerical type things that we had to come back and fix.
But that's the part of this that you're describing, this
I'm
reconciliation. Yeah. Now, payroll is a place where it might happen because obviously services there are provided by people, and so payroll is a dominant expenditure in that department other than services that are delivered to people. But,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
You've got, I'm guessing you need to be gone by noon?
I don't have a time frame. I'm just
How
trying
about
to
you,
fit
Dick?
within yours. And the questions are good. Actually, we've got through the meat of it. So those pages 5 through 8 are the funds you would normally work with on an ongoing basis. Those that you budget for. I'm just going to tell you a few things we look at. A, you have a statutory requirement to have a positive fund balance in each of those funds. And we have achieved that. We've had one or two exceptions in our history, but at the end of this year, they're all positive. The other thing that we look at is compliance with budget law. And the most significant of those compliance issues from our perspective is, did we overspend appropriated budgets? And we did in one case, just the insurance reserve fund. We did attempt to address that near the end of the year by adopting a supplemental budget to kind of tack on, but we missed it just a little bit. It's about $5,000. So this is a minor thing, but doesn't eliminate my obligation to disclose it in the footnotes. So I did. It doesn't affect the report, so it's still unmodified. And frankly, for a small amount like that, I would be really surprised that there's a question from any source. But
I had proposed early on, speaking with Donna, is to look at our budget and where we are quarterly and to make any changes if necessary. Do you see that as a positive? It's my understanding other counties do that. Sometimes you might have line items that just didn't fall where they needed to fall, or you might have some money that needs to go here and not
in a
there.
different category. All local governments have to do that. How formal you get depends on the setting and circumstance. But we do monitor that spending against the budget on a monthly basis. But kind of a couple things to keep in mind on that. Number one, unfortunately, things are not as convenient as our revenue and expending being in equal twelfths throughout the year. So reacting to that each month by amending your budget, what I think would be an exercise in futility, frankly. Now when we get to this time of year, we're approaching the fall, we have 8 or 9 months under our belt, we might begin to have a better idea if we think we're going to be over. And as long as you amend that budget before the end of the year and appropriate the additional monies that are necessary if it's going to a higher level, then you've at least complied with the budget law. Another option would be we don't know how this revenue and spending pattern is going to take place, but we had something extraordinary happen that we didn't anticipate in our previous budget. Extraordinary thing might be, for example, a grant that we applied for and it's $500,000. But we know that that's going to put us over. So you can do a supplemental budget that deals with only that slice of revenue and the corresponding spending. And so that can get tacked on. And you can do that at any time during the year that you deem appropriate. So the other thing is, if we're over on certain line items, but we're below on other line items, so there's kind of a balancing effect, that's probably okay, because what we look at is the total spending by fund, not each
By fund.
line item.
That's good.
Got a quick question on page 8.
Yes, sir.
See, we have a total change in fund balances that we begin with at 537,000.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, we see a total change of 855, and I can see how that occurred. But where did this 537 figure come from initially?
That was the ending balance of the previous year.
Of
So
our
that would have
general
been,
fund?
well, that would be all the funds. So if you go back to page 7, near the bottom, you see second line up from the bottom. It says fund balances January 1st. And if you go, I'm sorry, you got to go up 2 lines. That's the net change, 537. The page 8 is a conversion to the net income that Jay was asking about on the government line. And I was referencing the wrong line when I told you that. The page 6 is the total fund balances at the beginning of the year, 4,148,000 to net position. Okay, so those are conversions from the governmental funds to the government line. But if we just want to look at the change for the current year, or just the funds as we operate them and budget for them,
compared to last year, what did we, at the end of the year,
then we started with the year with 3,610,312 across all the funds. And across all the funds, we had more revenue than spending by 537,872. So 537 means we got more revenue than what we spent.
So we have this 537 then, is that we were actually, instead of having a zero budget and we projected, we actually ended up with a surplus of 537.
Yeah, if you projected that you were going to break even, spending equaled revenues for 2016, we did a little better than that.
That's what I'm saying, but that's what,
Yes.
so our net position as a county,
Improved.
we were about $500,000 better off going into the start of this year,
Yes, sir.
as we're looking at what our budgeting is for next year.
Yes, sir.
And that's in spite of the other expenses and stuff that we've had.
Well, but you're talking December 31st, and we had major monies for the Wetmore building that happened after January 1 on.
But even that, with the extra we put in after the first of the year, we had what, maybe, what would you say, 100,000?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know. I have to
That's
look
the
at
first
that.
that we spent?
I thought it was a little bit more.
Because we'd already approved
You already proved 2 something.
Pardon me?
225 that you pulled from your funds.
Right, and that had been budgeted in through the end of last year.
And then we had our surprises that we had to address.
Yeah, but they will, I don't think the surprises will equal $500,000 though.
Oh, no.
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 We'll still come out on that positive.
Yeah.
I'm saying maybe 100,000. I'm just trying to get a feel financially on.
yeah, and I'm looking kind of at history here. So what happened from the first of the year to halfway through, 7 months through 2017, well, I don't know. I couldn't answer that part of the question.
Well, we've had some changes, but I guess what I'm looking at is that there are other things we're going to have to do, and we may have a little extra money that we can do with. We had some savings from this last year's budget. This year's budget, I think we may be, we're certainly going to not eat up all of that. So we can, like we're talking, part of these are capital improvements, I realize, but there's some costs that are coming up that we can maybe absorb them.
Possible. But that's where your observation from a moment ago comes into play, is that we look at, now that we're just about done with 7 months, we look at 7 months and say,
see where we are.
okay, do we still have some of that $500,000 improvement intact, or have we already used some to this point? I don't know the answer to that question.
My gut feeling is we still have some of it.
We may, but the financial statements that are going to come from our finance people, we're going to know before too much longer here. So.
Half's gone, I would say.
I'm sorry?
Half is gone.
Half is gone. is what you just said. Half of that.
So we got 250,000.
So we may have used some of it, but so yeah, this is this. There is no exact answer. This is fluid because this changes every day as we receive and spend monies. But
Yeah, half is gone, and I'm understanding maybe some of the things in the county might be up this year. Sales tax and some of the
hope
things.
we have some good news
better
too.
than-
Yeah.
So the
Let's
income
hope.
side may also be improving a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I think that gets us by those. The other basic financial statements were internal service fund, which is really our insurance fund. It's just the rules in GASB require us to treat it as a separate internal service fund rather than a special revenue fund. So its statements are all by itself. There isn't anything really there that was out of the ordinary. And there's a fiduciary fund financial statement, which looks like a little mini balance sheet on page 12. And of course, all that represents is all the monies from the various taxing agencies come into the county treasurer's office. Not all of that is the counties. We have to pass it through to the schools and the towns and so on. And this is the pass-through money that hadn't been dispersed at December 31st. That's all it is. The notes to the financial statements start on page 13. They go through page 28. You can be relieved to know that we're not going to read all of those, but I'm going to tell you a few things that are in there. Okay? Page 18 is a note dealing with stewardship and compliance. So this is a place we would potentially disclose compliance-related findings if we had any. The only one that we have is this minor overspending in the insurance fund. When I say overspending, we overspent what our amended and appropriated budget was slightly. That does not mean that we didn't have the resources to be able to spend it. That's a different question. Focuses on the spending question only.
It's only $5,000.
That's it. We're in good shape there. We had no other findings to disclose here. We're in compliance with the Tabor rules, as I mentioned, always have been. Page 19 is a synopsis of cash and investments. But for the most part, those are held by the county treasurer, as we're required to do. Page 21 is a summary of changes in capital assets. So all the assets of the county at their original cost, not their current value. Their original cost, less an allowance for depreciation other than non-depreciable amounts, which are, in our case, land and things that aren't fully constructed yet. So we have construction in progress. We don't depreciate it until it's complete.
How would the changing values of the Wetmore Community Center be reflected here?
That would be if you look at that table near the top, you see land is the first line, 317. Yep. The second line, assets in progress. That means we have a project that we're working through that hasn't
so that's
been
what that
completed.
372 would appear.
Exactly.
Got it.
Page 23 is our long-term debt. We talked about the only thing really we appropriate for on a regular basis is the capital lease obligations. Compensated absences are basically covered by people using their time. That's what happens. But if we theoretically ceased operations on December 31st and had to pay everybody, that would be an approximate amount that we would owe. And the other obligation is that landfill business that we talked about. Counties do not have, local governments, I should say more correctly, do not have an obligation to fund that. So you don't have to set cash aside to do it, as long as you satisfy certain financial tests. And those financial tests have to be reported on each year. Your engineer does some calculations, submits them to me, and I test the calculations for the items that are extracted from the year-end financial statements. we each give a report as to whether you're compliant or not.
And then the chairman has to sign it and say that to the best of his knowledge this is inaccurate.
Something like that. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know, Donna, do we have business interruption insurance? Like, just say we had a disaster in this building. And it's going to take us a few days because we really don't have a place to set up. Okay? And I'm specifically looking at our IT position and our backup system. And we're not on a generator, and God forbid something happens. Do we have business interruption insurance? Do governments have that? Should they?
I'm not aware that we have it. And I would have to say, I can't hardly think of one that I work with that does.
That does have it?
Not for something quite like that.
I'm just thinking of disaster.
Well, but that's,
Yeah.
it has to go in our emergency reserves and go from there.
That's your rainy day fund, and
But
that's where you look
sometimes
at.
you can get coverage for
I-
business interruption.
I do not know the answer to that question, but I can tell you that most of the governments I work with do not have such a provision in their policy.
Okay.
They may have provisions for, coverage of damage to property, which those funds can get redirected, but to say that we had, an operating cost recovery provision, not that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
I guess what we're thinking, or what I'm thinking of, Sam, is that we've changed so much as a society. We now sit here and look out this window and wonder if we're safe sitting at this table. If we were to have a bombing, or we were to have a fire of something here in the building, that could just like they had in Douglas County back 25 years ago, we got people that aren't going to get salaries, or if we pay them, we're not getting the use out of them. The emergency setups, there can be a real disruption. I lived in Douglas County when the courthouse burned down.
Well, I don't know how to answer that other than I would agree that we probably look at our risk assessment a little differently now than we did a generation ago. And but I can't answer to you, what products are available.
No, I'm just asking.
Nor what the corresponding
hypothetically.
cost would be. Certainly we have coverage on the things that are traditional, physical property damage. But
My
that doesn't
concern,
address
yeah.
this interim operating question.
I guess my concern is the condition of our county assets. Our buildings have not been maintained, so it's an issue.
Great report so far.
Well, we're almost done with what I'm going to tell you anyway. I did want to mention that bit on the landfill, that we've up to now we've been in compliance with those. They're basically some financial ratios. We've always been able to maintain.
And now I think in the past, though, up to a point we had a double whammy. We had the closing of this landfill we were covering, and we had the closing of the.
You did, and that doesn't mean that some of the cost associated with that might be an inconvenience, at least at a certain point. But the measures that they require us to use to determine if we can simply use that coverage test, as opposed to either sending money to the state, basically you escrow funds to address those obligations, or you get a bond, all of which costs us money.
The point I wanted to bring up, though, Clint's worked, and I think we finally have, with the exception of maybe a little bit of maintenance, I think we finally have this landfill out here from the states that we've got it's closed. So if we've been looking at it in the past, that's something that is.
And these closure and post-closure costs that are estimated here deal only with the current landfill. Nothing associated with the old one.
Because it's just been until this last year, we got this last one closed.
But these rules changed over time. Years ago, you didn't have to report any of this in our report. We didn't do anything. But that's not the case anymore.
What are you saying? You're earning your keep here.
Well, I think so.
Our meetings used to be short, now they're long.
There's more pages in this dang thing than there used to be, I can tell you that. That's really it. The things that follow the footnotes in supplemental information are in two categories, really. One is required supplementary information, and what's required is a budget to actual comparison for the general fund and each of the major special revenue funds. So same data we've been looking at. That's not required for non-major funds, but we include it anyway as other supplementary information so that we can, we have some data to look at so we know how the year ended up. And we also use that to display to the state that we've complied with budget law in each of the respective funds. So that's the purpose of that. And the very last thing to the report is unique to counties and towns that receive and expend highway user tax monies. So you actually issue this report to the state that your county's personnel compiles and sends in. And then if we do anything, for example, audit adjustments at the end of the year that change those figures, then we update this report and have to attach it to the body of the audit report. So that's the reason that it's there, because the state says they want it there.
So, do you have any recommendations going forward that we need to do differently, or Donna, or in the position of John, that you would want to see change?
Yeah, we have kind of talked about some of those issues just as you've asked questions, here for the last little bit. And we've had some things that we've recommended in the past that have been resolved.
Okay.
So, for example, a year ago, two of those issues were we had some old balances between funds that had been there a long time, and we just never taken them steps to clear them. And I wanted us to do that because the state law says you can do that. You can have temporary advances between funds. You're just supposed to pay it back within a year. And we didn't always do that. So I wanted to see us clear those up, and we did. We talked about the airport and sticking the tanks. We did manage to do that at the end of the year, so I'm comfortable that we had a good inventory at the end of 2016. It wasn't always the case in years past. But as we discussed, I think it's worthy of some additional oversight because the margins still seem to vary quite a bit from period to period. And one thing that's new that we didn't talk about specifically because it kind of falls outside your realm, but you're stuck with it, in a sense, because it has to be included in our report, is E911. At E911, we've had some personnel changes over the last year or two. Its books and records were not current and weren't complete. So it took some extra time and effort to compile that stuff. And I understand that some steps have been taken to rectify that now in 2017, but I did not personally observe those. But basically, what we're saying is we want a complete set of books, balance sheet, income statement, revenues and expenditures, reconciled on an ongoing basis.
It's better than it was, but we still have some work to do, I think.
So we may have already begun to address those things in 2017, but in 2016 that was not the condition that we found.
We've had some unaudited reports, but I'm beginning to get a sense that, and you guys can add to that, but I think we're getting a better sense on what E911 has now versus where we were before.
I've been asked to look at that with Cindy, and we just have to come up with a time to look at it. I know she's got a concern.
So, what we do about it would be probably depending on what you find at this point.
So I will make that commitment to look at their books. Okay.
with those exceptions, we actually have a pretty positive report. We really don't have any compliance findings other than that slight overspending in the insurance fund. Certainly that little variance didn't cause us to have any condition of financial distress there, so that's all good. So we're living within the bounds of our budget, as difficult as it may be sometimes. We still don't have any bonded debt, so that's a positive attribute here. And as you know, we're paying down those capital leases a little bit. I have to go back to my records and look, but it wasn't that many years ago that we had outstanding obligations on capital leases that were around about $1 million. And if you look at the detail on the balance sheet and footnotes, it's about $250,000 down now. So we've made quite a bit of headway in paying some of those down. So when we look at it from that perspective, we had overall pretty good year, I think.
I have a question, and I guess this is to try to make our finance department more effective and efficient. If we were working with time clocks, I know Donna spends an unbelievable amount of time trying to do payroll and the calculations. Do you have any observations on how she's doing that?
Well, I think given the systems that we've got, she's doing a pretty bang-up job. But
she is.
Get off your chair.
I'm just
Get on the
wondering.
floor.
I'm just wondering whether she needs to move to a different system because it seems like a dinosaur.
We, at some point, and I think one of you mentioned that a little while ago. I don't recall who maybe that.
Maybe it is.
It might have been you. At some point, we're going to have to address upgrades to the software.
That was.
And yes, in some respects, that would help because we would have some features in current software that we don't have. It might take a little of the manual part of it away. But it's never going to be as easy as just to push the button. And before I kind of just leave, I don't know if you have any more questions. I'll stay as long as you like, but I just want to get in here. Most of our interaction is with Donna and John, and they do a great job helping us gather data that we need to get through this process. And once in a while we give them a little ding if things aren't perfect, but overall, I wish everybody responded to us the way that they do.
Well, that's great. The compliments.
That's great to hear.
Nice to hear.
How many county employees do we have?
Ordinarily 80.
80, okay. So you're telling me that if we were just a company with 80 employees, that it wouldn't make sense to have time clocks and a program where you could come to that, they would have to do it individually on all 80?
No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying, given the system that we have today, we're doing about as good as you could expect.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. No.
But at some point, we are going to have to upgrade the software, both general ledger and peripheral packages like payroll. And when I have seen those in other settings, they have features that are just not available on the old
Under
software.
our current software.
Right.
No.
Right.
But from a I'm in a broader sense, from a management tool, that makes sense as a business to go from a manual system to an electronic.
There's
data accumulation system.
where you can, and obviously when you deal with that issue, you're going to encounter cost-benefit sort of questions you'll have to address. Do you need something at this level? Something at this level will be fine.
Well, you're going to have a time where you've got to do everything twice to move that over.
It's that, if you've worked with this stuff for a while, you know that computers it's not gotten simpler over the last, decades. It just doesn't. And for example, I think one of you asked about the compensated absences. We're essentially doing that manually. department heads are responsible for keeping track of that, and we come up with spreadsheets that they're supposed to, summarize that information and provide it to Donna. But in some payroll systems, if you do the reporting correctly in each pay period, it tracks that for you based upon your organization's policies. So there's things like that that are taking time that might not know. Flip side is, we only really make you go through that at the end of the year because we have to have an updated number in these financial statements.
Now, are you aware of our new policy that was approved? So you have a copy of that, the policy number?
I do.
Great.
I guess a 500-pound gorilla that's on my back, or in general, our computer system in terms of, help me out with the system we have for the assessor and the clerk and the
Assessor, treasurer.
and treasurer. We've got some stuff here we're going to have to be making some renewals or some changes, some adaptations or something. Aren't we facing that?
It's a big change. It's an expensive change to upgrade the system.
And I guess as we're looking at this, maybe this is a time we also see what else, make a wish list. What else could be, if it makes sense?
Well, I don't know that I'd have anything outside those. I mean, that's pretty comprehensive when you talk about general ledger,
It's big.
payroll,
Well,
and the specific needs of the departments, such as the treasurer's office and the clerk's office, P&Z, the assessor's
Yeah.
office.
But what we're saying
So-
is that when we make that decision, and at the time, what would be beneficial is, yes, to have
That's
time.
exactly what, I agree with you. Yep.
That would be at that time.
Yep.
Did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Maybe outside your purview, but our local bank is in the process of changing hands right now. Is that something that, I spoke to the treasurer about it, she said, don't worry, everything's great, but I was wondering if you had any input into that.
Well, just a couple things as a reminder. Okay, so as a local government, we're subject to the provisions of the Public Deposit Protection Act. So there's some good things in that, and there's also some constraints. One of the constraints is that we can't open accounts at credit unions. We can use commercial banks, we can use savings and loan associations, but not credit unions. So in a small community, sometimes that can be a limiting factor. You do get $250,000 FDIC insurance coverage, and at the end of the year, we were kind of below that threshold in the account balances we had. That may not necessarily be true at any point during the year, however. But as a local government, the banks are supposed to pledge a percentage of their collateral to the state bank commissioner to cover that excess. So they're theoretically supposed to have that pledge with the state to cover that contingency. That gives local governments a little bit of a measure of protection that you do not have as private individuals or businesses.
Thank you.
And practically, we only really need to be sure that we get all the signatures and all of that stuff, because you're changing, but they may not be, I don't know what the ownership, that they changed the name, but they left it the same, if we have to worry about any of those kinds of things, or that's taken care of internally through the bank.
Just the signature card?
Yeah, I mean, whatever else we have from an ownership standpoint that we have to.
Well, any accounts we have, typically the funds have to flow through the county treasurer's office, so that's one of our controls, obviously. Our other control is that we shouldn't open any new accounts without the board-specific resolution to do so. So that's why I think one of yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
I'm just thinking that you had gotten me a bank card. I haven't activated it.
That's just a credit card.
Oh, that credit card.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Should
not
I wait?
That's not what I meant.
But I mean, that's under the old bank name. Should I wait?
I don't think any of that changes.
As far as I know,
Is that
it's
gonna
all
change?
changing the same, it's just in the background that they've reorganized, but I actually don't know that for sure, that's what I thought. I
Wendy
read.
told me the bank name and all the accounts and all the signature cards and everything, all the internal mechanisms will remain the same. Just the stock ownership of the bank is changing.
I've been through about 5 or 6 acquisitions with my personal accounts over the years, and I've never had to do any documentation with the exception of the time that the FDIC closed the damn bank.
The only time we had an issue was on the last time when they had, changed branches. And I think 4 employees actually had an account number with another branch.
Okay.
So that we had to change, someone's account, they had to give up their old number on new checks. But other than that, it was just a fluke.
I've been through a lot of these audit reviews. I've never had one this positive before in my life. I mean, I always hear, well, here's the things you're doing great, and here's the things you need to fix. I guess that's a testament to, like you said, those folks behind you who've just done a terrific job.
Yes, and I think we've been fixing things as you go. So
It's a
yeah,
working process.
yeah, it's a working. It never changes. In the sense that we're never going to reach a state where we're absolutely perfect. We can find no way that we can improve. Never going to happen. But by and large, the key things that we look for, okay, we complied with the budget law. We don't have, compliance findings other than that little bit in the insurance fund. We don't have a condition at that point at the end of December that looks like we have solvency issues. We've complied with the rules on the landfill. Now that hasn't always been the case here. We've had years where we had to talk about issues that were a little bit tougher. But this isn't one of them. So at least for the moment,
Okay, we're good.
yeah.
Would you mind sharing contact information with me, because I want to go through this
Oh, absolutely.
a little further. If I have any questions.
I just brought these. I didn't bring cards. So can I just write it down for you on there?
Well, Sam, I got the most experience of the 3 of us, and I haven't got a whole lot of experience, but of the meetings that I've sat through with you, this looks to me like it's one of the cleanest audits that we've had. And it's going to be it is a reflection on John and Donna. We're so, had a good crew. And John, we announced this morning your desire to move on. But at the same time, you've been a godsend to us, to the county in general.
Thanks.
And I think it's very important we recognize that. Do we have anything else on the agenda? On the audit?
I'm good.
Would you like to make a comment? Yes, ma'am.
Just a side note, on the self-insurance, it was an automobile accident that I had paid for it, and the insurance proceeds had not came in time to be deposited. That's why.
That's where that is.
shortfall.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sam's easy to find. You take on Kepler Boulevard just before you hit 50, you turn to the right.
Now that they're doing some work on that road, it's not as easy as it once was, but the place is still the same. Okay.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate all that you do for us as a county.
You bet. You're welcome. Thank you, sir. Appreciate seeing you. Good to see you. Good to see you.
John and
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Donna,
Same
to
here.
both of you, thank you too.
Okay,
This is-
good to see you. Good to see you.
And, if you want to jump up like she did, you're welcome to, John, but we're not going to take any liability. Okay. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Over there.
Back on the agenda
You're
quickly.
signing
Yeah,
it.
A few items left.
they're in their alphabetical order.
We still have the DOLA grants, which we need to sign.
Now, there's no signature. You just need to have a motion that you're okay with applying for those. That's all.
Okay, both of these, we found out that we have an opportunity to get some DOLA funding. Last time we went, checked into it, and it didn't look like we were going to. Are you wanting checks?
Just one. if I could peek through the pile.
Which, yeah,
I've got the first half.
I want to pay off Attorney Smith so he comes back tomorrow.
what numbers are you wanting? Or?
On there.
Yeah. Those are signed.
We're probably pretty close.
Excuse me just a moment so I don't get confused here. All right.
Nope.
I make a motion, well, to give background on this. We have some state funding from the highway department. We have, we're seeking additional monies. Roger and Gary and I had a conference call with Christy Dune. And at that time she said, I'm sorry, there's nothing that we can do that would qualify. She called back on Wednesday or Thursday, and told Gary that she found some place that we could maybe get some monies. This grant has to be in today, be electronically submitted. We're requesting 100,000, 130, whoops.
100,000, that would bring us up to the total that they're estimating, that
Okay.
Jimmy is estimating, but
So we talked about this briefly the other time we were going to apply, then we decided not to apply. I make a motion that we do apply for the ADOLA grant regarding the repair of the and replacement of the bridge system on Hermit Road at the edge of town.
I'll second the motion. Can I look?
You want to look at those?
I'm not gonna spend much time.
Now, what we're hoping to do with this grant is that this will be a match between the federal dollars to match our DOLA dollars.
Federal.
Now, I see you have a signature of some kind here, Brenda. It says Custer County.
let me see. This is Cindy's thing. This is not
Oh,
my
wrong
thing.
one. Do you
Yep.
have that grant?
It doesn't need a signature. All I need is a motion.
Do you have the documentation ready to submit?
Yes, I do.
Have you folks seen it?
It
Let's
was
see.
included in your board packet,
I saw it.
Okay.
and I
If
thought
you
I
don't have
had
any
a,
questions on that,
I saw it.
I'll make the motion that we go ahead and apply for this DOLA grant.
I'll second the motion.
Discussion?
You already made a motion.
You made it?
I seconded it. I think
We already got that, all right, well,
yeah.
all right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now I have,
those don't need any motion. That's already been taken care of. All it needs is your
with
signature.
my signature. Okay? And do we have any other business to come before the board at this time?
Let's do this again tomorrow.
I want to look at a couple of things before I adjourn here. Just bear with me just a moment.
Those things are,
Just requiring,
Jackie's, yeah, just needs your signature. And
what's the DOLA one here?
this is for the Wetmore Community Center. It's just the quarterly update. It has no reimbursement request at all. It's just an update.
Just a report.
Uh-huh,
These are just for my signature.
yes.
Okay.
And then this too is just
do
for
it for
your
signatures?
signature. Yep.
What else,
We
is that
keep
it?
one,
That's
and
it.
you sign and I sign. He
far as you
takes
know?
the original
As far
back
as
and
I
I
know.
keep one on file here.
Okay. At this time, no other business before the board. I will declare the Board of County Commissioners adjourned at 12:27.